Welcome to Moonlit Publishing. Moonlit Publishing, your ultimate destination for irresistible werewolf romance, where passion howls under the full moon.
Chapter 1. The door exploded inward with a thunderous crack that shook the walls of our tiny house, like the world itself had just ripped open. My mother burst through, slamming it shut behind her so hard the frame rattled like bones in a storm. Her breath came in sharp, panicked gasps. "Samuelson is coming. He's furious. He wants his payment now, and you have to vanish. Right this second." Her brown eyes were wild, pleading, as she lunged for me on the sofa where I'd been lost in a book, trying to escape the suffocating reality of our lives. The words hit me like ice water. Samuelson. That monster of an alpha, the one who treated my mother like something he owned, something disposable. Rage boiled up instantly, hot and bitter in my throat. How dare he? How dare any so-called protector prey on the vulnerable like this? An alpha was meant to shield his pack, not devour them. But before I could snarl back, her hands were on me, shaking me free of my frozen fury. Her grip on my arm tightened, nails digging in just enough to sting. "Charlene, now. Don't be stupid. You know I could take him," I shot back, voice low and dangerous. "That's exactly why you can't." Her whisper cracked with terror. "The only female shifters left are alpha heirs. If you shift, even once, everyone will know who your father really was. And then they'll know you're a bastard?" I finished for her, the word tasting like ash. "They already call me that." The whispers never stop. Little do they know, it's the truth. She went still. Then bang. A fist hammered the front door like judgment itself. Her head whipped around, eyes widening in raw fear. Without another word, she shoved me backward with surprising force, wolf strength even without the shift. I stumbled, caught off guard, and crashed into our shared bedroom. My head slammed against the bed frame. Stars burst behind my eyes, the room tilting in dizzy waves. She seized the moment. The door slammed shut. The lock clicked, trapping me inside. I scrambled up, ignoring the throbbing pain, and lunged for the handle. But his voice already boomed through the wood, Samuelson's growl, thick with entitlement. Then my mother's sharp cry. A thud. Shadows danced under the crack at my feet as two figures struggled. His hands on her. The sickening sounds of mistreatment. Fury ignited. I pounded the door with everything I had: fists, shoulders, rage. Splinters flew as the wood tore free. Rough fingers clamped my forearm like iron and yanked me forward into blinding light. I looked up into the dark, furious eyes of Alpha Samuelson himself. His gaze raked over me, slow, predatory. "So you're Karina's bastard pup. All grown up." A low growl rumbled in his chest. He glanced back at my mother, crumpled and trembling. "You've hidden her from me this whole time?" I would have taken her instead. Look at her now, but no time for that. A guest is arriving. Every unmated female of age attends. "You're coming with me." His grip tightened, dragging me out. I dropped my weight, heels scraping the floor, fighting every step. My mother begged, offering herself instead, but he ignored her. I waited in a heartbeat, lash out and doom us both, or endure, for now. Vengeance could wait. It would come. He yanked me by the hair as we hit the cold pavement outside. Scalp screaming, world blurring, I was dragged through the territory while pack members watched in frozen horror or looked away in cowardice. When he finally released me, I rose slowly, vision steadying on a room packed with other girls, some polished and hopeful, others still hastily fixing makeup. Excitement hummed faintly in the air, like they saw this as a chance at escape. I rubbed my aching head as Samuelson barked orders. "Our guest has scoured every pack. Doubt he'll find what he wants here." Eyes down. No speaking. No moves. "Make me look bad, and you'll pay dearly." He circled me, smirking at my ripped jeans, dirt-streaked tank. "I'll leave you just like this, raw and real." His hands roamed briefly. I bit back the urge to snap. "He arrives at midnight. Stay quiet for the next half hour." I tried to clean up, but his men shoved me back every time. One struck my face, lip splitting, blood warm on my tongue. Thirst clawed my throat, but I wouldn't beg. The room buzzed with mixed emotions, anxiety, fragile hope. We were livestock on display, yet some dreamed of trading one hell for another. Samuelson lined us up. When I didn't move fast enough, he shoved me to the end himself. You and your mother will settle this after. I stared him down, defiant, until his man whispered something. He straightened, eyes locking on me for a beat too long before striding away. Now our guest. You've heard the stories. Old war tales. Nightmares. Some thought him myth. Alpha Kiernan. The name landed like a blade. Fear rippled through the room, cold, electric. The Alpha who'd raised entire packs for territory. Ruthless. Unyielding. Different from anything we'd known. I wanted to bolt. Grab my mother. Run as rogues, packless, hunted, but free. But the odds crushed that dream. Rogues faced worse fates. And facing him? The most terrifying Alpha alive? With laws that crushed bastards like me, and threats to my mother's life hanging over every choice. I stayed rooted. Heart hammering. Waiting for midnight. Chapter 2. We were walked outside, the freezing night air nipping at my skin as the wind blew. I could smell him. His scent was unfamiliar, but not unpleasant, smelling of firewood and fresh mint. The combination had my head spinning with confusion. I did not know whether to be afraid or to relax and accept the situation. I could not see him yet, but I knew he was on the territory. My wolf could sense his power, so he had to be in close proximity. I looked around, seeing many of the older or mated pack members gathering to witness what was happening, to see the man many of us believed to be just a myth. I spotted my mother near a dimly lit lamppost. Her petite frame stood out against the people surrounding her. I could not decipher whether her red nose and puffy eyes were from the cold or from tears. Either way, I hated seeing her like this. She deserved so much more. I was pulled from my thoughts when a wave of raw power hit me, immediately silencing the area and capturing my attention. My wolf wanted to front at the sensation, but I pushed her down. I kept my eyes downcast, not wanting to draw attention to myself as the man and Samuelson exchanged formalities. The guest began at the beginning of the line. He either simply looked at a female or continued walking past without a glance. The only audible noise was his intake of breath as he took in each woman's scent. I could sense him near the girl next to me, then suddenly he was looming over me like a shadow. I stiffened as he leaned toward my neck, my body wanting to recoil at the sudden invasion of space. He stood up as he began to circle me. I watched his feet until they disappeared behind me. I looked up, seeing my mother at the front of the crowd. She watched with fear as her dark eyes met my greenish-blue hues. I could smell her fear. It made me sick knowing she was afraid. From the line of sight, I knew he must be well over 6 feet and powerfully built. I wanted to see what everyone was so afraid of. Without another thought, I looked up. A low growl came from the man. I gasped as piercing hazel eyes bore into mine. A moment later, he had me by the wrist, tight enough to secure me, but not enough to hurt me. He backed me away from the line, pinning me against the stone wall near the back of the house. He moved toward me once more, and then suddenly I felt a sharp pain in my neck. I cried out, wanting him to stop. I could smell my blood in the air as he drew back, a wicked, possessive smile on his face. My blood was on his lips. I was paralyzed, and I felt my limbs weaken as I slumped against him. This could not be happening. Suddenly, I was in his arms as he walked back around, his grip deathly tight as if daring someone to try to take me. Everything felt heavy. I could only move my eyes, and they darted toward my mother. She lunged my way, her instinct to protect me, but she was intercepted by a large man who lifted her over his shoulder. I watched her fight to get down, but she soon disappeared as she was placed into a vehicle. With shaking hands, I touched my neck in disbelief, feeling the area wet with warm liquid. I pulled away to see my hands covered in blood. I looked up to see his eyes trained on my split lip. "Who put their hands on you?" he asked in a low voice, his eyes darkening with anger. I could not speak, but I knew I had to provide an answer. I let my gaze travel to where Samuelson stood with his men. Kiernan turned knowingly after setting me on the ground. My limp body sagged against the house. Samuelson backed up quickly as Kiernan approached. I thought Kiernan was bluffing until he suddenly struck Samuel. Screams echoed as people began scrambling, afraid for their lives. I watched with disbelief as Kiernan ended Samuelson's life in a single, brutal motion. Kiernan turned away from the body as if it were nothing. I could hardly think over the horrified screams of the pack members running past. This was really happening, and I could not move. My body felt heavy, my limbs weighing me down as I tried to shift my weight. I nearly fell, my eyelids feeling heavy as I slumped further against the stone wall. Dark clouds lined my vision. My limbs felt detached as I tried and failed to move again. The last thing I saw was Kiernan in front of me, and then my world went black. Chapter 3. I opened my eyes slowly, sitting up to see a group of men standing a little ways from me in a circle as they talked. My dark hair fanned around me, hiding my face. I immediately spotted Kiernan, his form being the broadest and tallest of them all. I looked around the room, unmoving, my eyes landing on a sliding door that led to a vast amount of greenery laden with snow. I breathed in deeply and bolted for the door as fast as I could. I had just thrown it open when I felt a grip on my wrist. A man shut the door quickly, positioning himself in front of it as he held me. I fell back on the floor, looking up into hazel eyes that bore into mine. I sat in a low crouch. "Where is my mother?" I growled. "All you must know is that she is alive," Kiernan said. I stood up slowly, putting my back against the wall so as not to be caught off guard. "What is your name?" he asked. "All you must know is that I know yours, Kiernan," I spat. He frowned at my response. "Tell me, or I give the order to end your mother's life." I growled at him. He raised his hand, snapping his fingers, and the men began to move. "Charlene." "I am Charlene," I said quickly. He brought his hand down, and the men paused. He snapped his fingers again, and they ran out of the house. I shouted for them to stop. I lunged at Kiernan, managing to punch him in the face. I was about to strike again when his loud roar silenced me. He gripped my wrists, pinning them at my side. I turned at the sound of my mother's voice as she walked into the house, escorted by the men. I ran to her, and she embraced me. Her smile made me forget, momentarily, the situation we were in. "You smile as if I am going to let her live," I heard. I turned around to find Kiernan standing right behind me. "Please, do not hurt her." "She is all I have," I said truthfully. Clearly, he wanted me alive, or he would have killed me already. He snapped his fingers, and the men came forward, taking my mother out of the house as she pleaded to stay with me. "Please," I begged once again. "Why should I do as you ask? You continue to defy me, and you struck me. I am your alpha before I am anything else to you now," he growled. "I am sorry. Just do not hurt her." "I will do anything." "Please," I said, looking up at him. I stood in front of him quietly. My mother had sacrificed herself nearly every day for Samuelson to allow us to live. It was my turn to protect her. I walked slowly until I stood right in front of him. I lowered myself to my knees, reaching up slowly with shaking hands to unbuckle his belt. I froze when his hands gripped mine, stopping me. He brought me up as he stared at me silently. I almost thought I saw sadness in his eyes, but he stifled the emotion quickly. My mother came back in with a fresh pair of clothes and a sandwich. Shock was on her face as she stared at us, and I quickly stepped away. "There is a guest house out back. She can stay in for now, but everything is here in the main house, and you are welcome to help yourselves until dusk. As for you, Charlene, you will be staying here with me. You both can shower, then please come down and eat," he said. I did not like it, but I did not want him to change his mind, so I nodded and went up the stairs with my mother. I entered the room that clearly belonged to Kiernan. It smelled of his strong scent, with hints of spices and vanilla. After showering, I put on an oversized gray satin robe. On the bed, I found a pair of jeans and a knit sweater that I gladly put on. I walked downstairs into the living room, where about 10 people stood talking. They all turned my way as I entered. My mother stood up at the sight of me. I looked for Kiernan, and then I felt his presence behind me. He beckoned me forward, but I held still, irritated that my only option was to listen to him. He growled at me. "Why are you doing this to me? Why me of all people?" I asked. Instead of responding, he suddenly threw me over his shoulder and began walking towards the group as I struggled. He released me, and I hit the floor. "Asshole," I growled. My mother helped me stand. I could feel the heat of my anger enticing me to shift, but I could not without revealing our secret. I looked at the people in front of me. They stood before a large mirror above the couch. I noticed no one was near the back door, and it was wide open. We had to get out of here. I looked at the coffee table and noticed the silverware near a bowl of fruit. I reached for a fork and spun around, plunging it into Kiernan's bicep. I bolted for the door, gripping my mother's hand. I shifted into my wolf without a second thought, feeling the heat of the change roll over my skin. My mother ran alongside me. I paused for a moment to allow her to jump on my back, then leaped off the porch. Suddenly, wolves sprang from the tree line and circled me, enclosing me against the porch. They had been waiting. I turned at the sound of booming laughter. I growled as Kiernan walked towards me with a grin, ripping the fork from his shoulder and tossing it aside. He leaped from the porch and stood in front of my wolf. Chapter 4. I watched as Kiernan shifted into a pitch-black wolf. His size and power were much greater than mine, but only because I had not received the title of alpha that was rightfully mine by birth. I had not been able to grow into my birthright, and it showed in my smaller stature. I watched Kiernan slowly as his eyes ran over my wolf. He seemed unimpressed, but I knew what he was doing. He was sizing me up. His eyes held a certain cockiness, as if he were daring me to try to outrun him. We both knew I could not, especially with my mother on my back, and I definitely would not leave her. I growled before shifting back to my human form, positioning myself in front of my mother. I did not care that I was uncovered. Kiernan growled, and I watched as every head around us dropped, their eyes averted. Kiernan shifted back into his human form, standing naked and unapologetic. His body was corded with muscle, and he stood with power and assurance. He stood like an alpha. His eyes held mine as he walked forward, anger etched into his features. I watched as he picked up a shirt from the porch, handing it to me with an outstretched hand. He turned, letting me dress without his gaze on me. He turned back toward me after I stopped fidgeting, a mischievous smirk on his face. "So, your father is Alpha Saxon, just as I suspected. I just did not believe you to be his firstborn heir because he has other children, sons," he spoke. My mother gasped at the name. Kiernan had hit the nail on the head, but I did not know why he suspected that of me, or how this man knew of my father when my mother had told me nothing. "How did you know?" I asked strongly. I needed to understand what gave us away. "You have his eyes and your wolf." I could feel her strength, the untouched potential beneath the surface. "I could taste your wolf in your blood when I marked you," he said. "Are you going to kill us?" I asked quietly. "By the looks of it, you did not even know who he was. I can almost guarantee your father has no idea you exist. I would never kill someone who is not to blame. Especially my mark," he spoke. I looked up at him quietly, trying to figure him out. 1 minute, he was emotionless and cold, and the next, it was as if he had an odd moral compass. "And when people see you have marked a bastard pup, what of that?" I asked. "They're fools for not seeing you for what you should be. It is your birthright. It is why you have the gift of the wolf." "Charlene, do you really believe I would value the opinions of ignorant wolves? And I would dare anyone to touch what is mine? It would be the last thing they do," he said darkly. I thought of Samuelson and his men and could not help but smile at his response, though the possessive stance was something I did not entirely agree with. "I will be contacting your father. The title is rightfully yours, and you both deserve to know each other. And his sons will not receive a title that is not theirs." "How old are you?" he asked quickly. "I will be 21 in a week. If an heir does not receive the title by their 21st season, their wolf abandons them, and I am sure you would not like losing the ability to walk as your wolf," he said. My mother's hand gripped mine, and I could see the regret in her eyes. "Call him, please," she said hurriedly. I could not bear the thought of not being able to run as a wolf. It was the only time I felt in control of my life. Already did. He should be here in a few hours by midnight, said a raven-haired woman as she came out of the house, her kind pale blue eyes shining at me. She was gorgeous, and her smile was bright. Well, Charlene. This is my mother, Elisheva, said Kiernan. I offered a small smile. She seemed kind enough, and I wanted to meet my father. If these people were willing to help me, then I would be cordial. I turned as a large man walked forward, his hazel eyes prominent just like his son's. He scooped up Elisheva in a hug and kissed her temple. Charlene, pleased to meet you. I am Jameson, Kiernan's father, said the man. He shook my hand, and I felt his immense strength. Nice to meet you both, I said awkwardly. He smiled and said, You look very much like him. Especially your eyes. You know my father well? I asked. We were childhood friends. I have met your mother once before as well. Hello, Karina. Pleased to see you again, he said, motioning toward my mother. I looked at her, and she moved toward me, but I shrugged her off. Kiernan looked nearly identical to his father, but there was no way my mother did not have some idea of who these people were, yet she had said nothing. I am sorry, Charlene. She tried. You lied to me. You said he wanted nothing to do with me. He does not even know I am alive. Why would you do this to me? I asked. He left me. He chose that title over us because I came from nothing, and he did not want to disappoint his family, she said. I understood that true mates would be drawn to each other by scent and touch. My mother had told me that, and I could see the loss in her eyes as she spoke of him. If you had told him, things could have been different. What you did was unjust to both of us, I said. I understand, and I am sorry. I just wanted to keep you from the heartbreak I suffered, she said quietly as she began to cry. I sighed and turned toward her. I will always forgive you, but you need to be honest with me. I am your family, and I am not going anywhere, I said, wiping her tears. Well, we'd better get ready. I told him to meet us at Pierrot's. Now, ladies, follow me. There is one more person you should meet, said Elisheva. Kiernan watched me as his mother laced her arm in mine. I felt in debt to him. After all this time, the questions I had my whole life were going to be answered tonight. We walked upstairs to Kiernan's room, and a bubbly dark-haired girl greeted us. She introduced herself as Alinda, Kiernan's younger sister, who was my age and eager to help me get ready. Chapter 5. I stared in awe at my reflection. I wore a deep maroon, form-fitting satin dress that hugged my curves, with delicate lace straps across my back and over my shoulders. My makeup was light yet smoky, and simple loose curls hung down to my lower back. My hair looked shiny and healthy. I hardly recognized the beautiful woman staring back at me. You look so beautiful, Alinda said. So do you, I replied, noting her black form-fitting dress and glowy skin. No, seriously, my brother is going to flip out, especially since you are showing off that body, she said, laughing. More than I cared to admit, Kiernan had been occupying my mind over the last couple of hours, and it was not in a way that made me want to lash out. I thought of his words. They were almost noble, and the fact that they came from him was pleasantly surprising. Well, if that is the case, he is going to be stunned, I said, grinning as she put the final touches on my hair and handed me a coat, which I gratefully slid on. I smiled as we walked down the stairs together. My mother was with Elisheva, and I was surprised to see the two looking like old friends. They were both so sweet and welcoming. I thought about Kiernan more as we walked. His family seemed so nice and genuine, but something seemed different about him. He was the outlier. I could not help but feel for him. He marked me, and I knew there was no changing that, so I would have to learn to live with him at least. In a way, I hoped we could become friendly. He had not harmed us, and yet I kept trying to run away. He had every right to be angry, but he was not, even after I had hit and struck him. It almost seemed as if he was trying. Maybe if I tried a little too, we could at least learn to be friends. You know, I have never really had a friend before. Thank you, I said to her. You're welcome. If it helps, I have never really had any either. Girls only ever talk to me to try to get close to my brother. You're different, though. I can tell he likes you already, she said with a smile. I furrowed my brow in confusion. We had only just met. I knew once a mate was marked, the bond would form between them, but this was faster than I had thought. What makes you say that? I asked softly. Kiernan swore he would never take a mate. My father was the one who convinced him to at least look, insisting that if he were to take one, it should be a true pairing. You are slowly softening him. Kiernan has not known anything but difficulty in a very long time, she said. I was going to ask what she meant by that when Kiernan suddenly entered my line of sight. To say he looked handsome was an understatement. He was dressed in a black suit that fit him snugly, the power in his build evident as he walked into sight. I inhaled his scent and breathed out slowly as it calmed my nerves. It floated around me in a comforting caress. I watched as his head whipped up when he caught my scent. His eyes took me in as they raked down my frame before settling on my face. You look very nice, he said roughly. There was a moment where he just continued to stare at me before he cleared his throat. I thought I saw a red tint on his cheeks and tried my best to stifle a smile as I thanked him with a small nod. It was a traditional greeting that showed respect. Charlene, if at any moment you feel uncomfortable, tell me and I will get you out of there, Kiernan said. I nodded gratefully as I felt myself growing nervous, but that was set aside when I saw my mother. She looked gorgeous in her long-sleeved black dress. She looked refined and beautiful, and I grinned at the sight of her. Mom, you look great, I said, laughing. She laughed and smiled as she took me in. You look striking. There is no room for question that Eric is your father. You always looked so much like him, she said, her fingers smoothing the side of my face. Jameson, Elishaba, and my mother took a separate car and drove ahead as we waited for Alinda's date, who happened to be her mate and the beta, Danilo. I recognized him as the man who had helped my mother into the vehicle earlier. Alinda smiled at the sight of him and kissed him briefly before turning toward us. You must be Luna Charlene. Pleased to meet you. I am Danilo, your beta, he said formally. I was a bit shocked at being addressed as Luna. I watched as he and Kiernan shook hands and hugged like old friends. I did not even notice we were walking to the car until Alinda's growl broke me from my thoughts. I saw Danilo holding his mate as she eyed an approaching female. The girl was dressed formally, her demeanor flashing entitlement as she flipped her blonde hair. So you're her? Kiernan's new interest, she said, chuckling. I groaned inwardly. I did not want to deal with a jealous female right now. I looked up at Kiernan. Anger was evident in his eyes, and he looked utterly annoyed as he chose not to engage. I would love to stay and chat, but Kiernan is taking me to dinner. Have a nice night, I said with a smile as Kiernan opened the door for me. The girl was made to step towards us, but Alinda walked forward, and she fell back, thinking it better not to face off with Alinda. I turned toward Kiernan, who was in the driver's seat. Ex-girlfriend. I asked with a grin. I would never call her that. That would insinuate that at one moment I cared for her, which is incorrect, he said. It was a long time ago. Kiernan was going through a difficult time, and she took advantage of that. She wanted a title, Alinda said. I knew what she meant. They had a history. Would he do that to me? He had stayed his hand earlier, but he could always change his mind. Would I be just another woman in his life? I can see what you are thinking, Charlene. I would never force you to do something you do not wish to do. I know you probably think it is empty coming from me and how I claimed you, but if I am being honest, I lost control. I saw hope in someone and my wolf took without asking. It was not right at all, and for that I truly apologize. However, I did not choose you for a temporary fantasy. I want to settle down. I did not think it was possible for me, but there is something about you that I find absolutely intriguing. Even if it is just in friendship, I want to prove to you that you can trust me, he said and began to drive. Chapter 6. The restaurant we went to was something of a melting pot for pretty much anything or anyone that wasn't human. As we walked inside, Kiernan placed his hand on my waist, causing me to look up at him in confusion. He tilted his head, and I saw heads following us, watching Alinda and me as we passed. I saw Danilo was holding Alinda in a similar fashion, and something told me not to question it. I was stunned by the warmth it stirred, recognizing the faint sparks of desire, and I rejected the thought as soon as it entered my mind. We came to a private room where I saw Elishaba and Jameson greeting a tall man and woman and 3 younger males, all seeming to be in their teens despite looking nearly grown. I knew it was him without seeing his face. I turned when I heard a gasp and saw my mother frozen next to me in shock. She gripped my arm, steadying herself as she stared at her old lover. They all turned at the sound, eyes landing on us. His identical blue-green eyes fell on my mother first. "Karina," he said and made to move towards her. I held my hand up to stop him as my mother shrank away. "No, you do not get to do that to her. You do not get to act innocent in all of this. You still left her," I spoke, positioning myself in front of my mother. I watched as his gaze fell on me and his features softened. He nodded, his eyes scanning my face, and I could see the moment it connected for him. "You must be Charlene," he whispered in awe. I nodded and walked forward. I gripped Kiernan's hand as I grew nervous, pulling him along with me. I did not know this man, and I would employ Kiernan to ensure my mother's and my safety. I shook my father's hand softly, unsure of what to do, and a smile grew on his face. "Would you like to meet your brothers, Charlene?" he asked me. I grinned. I had detested being an only child nearly my entire life, and knowing I had siblings instantly had me ecstatic. "This is Nathaniel, Everett, and Cyrus. Your younger brothers," he said. They all had our familiar eyes and greeted me with a smile and a hug. They definitely were not younger looking. They were built like grown men, each of them far taller than I. I heard a woman clear her throat, and my father turned toward her, introducing her as his Luna. I stiffened slightly as she held out her hand, and I shook it lightly. "I am Emmeline," she said, eyes running down my frame. "Charlene," I said, drawing back. I sighed as my mother walked toward us, her hand out, attempting to make amends and fix this for my sake. I felt pride swell in me at her humility. Emmeline looked down at my mother's hand and scoffed. "I will not shake hands with Omega filth," she spat. I growled at her words. And yet I shook hands with high-ranked filth. "We are all doing things we do not wish to do," I said in defense. She growled at me and looked at my father, who stared at her in disdain. "Emmeline, if you cannot be mature about this, you can go wait in the car." "I will sit and dine with my daughter," he said strongly. Emmeline turned and stormed out of the restaurant. My father motioned towards her, and my brothers each hugged me before excusing themselves to make sure their mother did not get herself into trouble. "Please sit," Jameson said, breaking the awkward silence. I sat between my mother and Kiernan, my father across from us, next to Danilo and Alinda. I watched as my father stole glances continuously at my mother. I could plainly see the love he still had for her. I cleared my throat, and my father's eyes snapped toward me, smiling shyly at being caught. "So, tell me how you have been. What pack were you in? You seem happy," he said to us. I sighed, thinking of how to explain this without it sounding as harsh as it had been. We bounced around a lot. We had to tell people my father was dead so that they would pity us enough to let us in their pack. I was never allowed to shift because it would give away who my father was, so I had to sit back and do nothing for years. I had to sit back and hear my mother give herself to an abusive person just so we could have a bed to call our own. It was never happy, I said. My father turned toward my mother, a sad expression on his face. "I am so sorry, Karina. If you had told me." "No, you left me. Why would I subject my daughter to the pain you caused me? You are nothing but a liar to me." "I would not have my daughter around someone who chose rank over his mate and child," my mother said. "I understand there is nothing I can say that will undo what I did, and for that I am sorry." "Emmeline is only cruel because she knows my heart has always been with you," he said. "Then why did you not at least make sure she was cared for?" "Samuelson was so cruel to her," I said. My father's eyes darkened as I mentioned that man. "What hap? He is dead. He put his hands on Charlene, and I ended his life," said Kiernan nonchalantly. My father went slack-jawed in disbelief, but gave a nod of approval. "He deserved it. He hurt your daughter and was planning on worse," my mother said. My father flinched at her words, but made no comment. My mother's hand gripped mine under the table, and I squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Agreed, he deserved it. And now? How are you faring?" he asked as he stared between Kiernan and me. "Actually, yes. We are figuring things out, I said honestly. My father smiled. And you, Karina? Your maid is going to be infuriated with you, my mother responded, ignoring his question. She has been with my beta for 3 years now. I am sure I have every right to ask the woman I actually care for a question about her well-being. I was so stupid, he admitted lowly. The table went silent, and I immediately felt bad for how I treated him initially. You could see how hurt he was. My mother had only shown me her claim once, by accident, but it was odd putting a face to the man she had loved. You guys should go talk, I said. My father stood up slowly, holding his hand out to help my mother up. She stared up at him stubbornly before she took it, and they walked out of the room. I grinned at them. They loved each other, but it was messy. But just talk. I do not need another sibling. I yelled. Chapter 7. I decided I wanted pasta, mostly because I loved the dish's richness, but also because it was simple and came with delicious bread. Kiernan motioned for the waiter, letting him know we were ready to place our orders. The waiter walked over to me first, a sly grin on his face. Hello, beautiful. What can I get for a pretty face like yours? He asked. Kiernan growled lowly at the man. You can get me a new waiter. Preferably a waitress. Goodbye, Kiernan said as he stood up and motioned for the young man to leave. Kiernan, relax. Do not ruin this for me, please, I said and gripped his hand, pulling him back down into his chair. I wanted to have a nice night with some food I could never afford. Was that too much to ask? The man recoiled when I said Kiernan's name. Kiernan. Alpha Kiernan. I am sorry, I will send someone over right away. My apologies, the guy said and took off. Kiernan chuckled deeply and took his seat next to me, offering me a glass of wine he poured, which I happily took before he poured his own. I could not help but laugh. I knew Kiernan could be cold, but for certain people, he made exceptions, and I think I was slowly becoming one of the few. I guess you could say we were becoming friends. I sipped my wine as an older waitress joined us. Alinda and I grinned as we sampled the few bottles on the table. I had never had wine before, but its bittersweet and earthy flavors began to grow on me. I was beginning to feel the effects of it, too. My body felt less tense, and I felt almost giddy. Elishiba had said the wine was specifically made with our kind in mind. Our high tolerance usually caused us to go unaffected by alcohol, but this was definitely making my head feel uplifted. Charlene, I ordered you your pasta since you were zoned out once again, I heard in Kiernan's amused voice. Well, it is not my fault you are used to people who do not have the mental capacity to have thoughts of their own, I said. Alinda squealed as she grinned at her brother from across the table, nearly spitting wine as she brought her napkin to her mouth. He smirked at my sass as he leaned closer to me. You are my mark, so you're the only one I will ever let talk that way to me. So, enjoy it, darling, he said deeply, the low timbre of his voice causing a chill to run across my skin. I chuckled, but I knew he was not kidding. I relished in that and took another sip with a humored grin. I was about to speak when a tall, white-haired man came in with a gorgeous, white-haired woman by his side. Despite their hair, they hardly seemed older than I, but I knew they were aged in an ethereal way. They were both beautiful and had a slight accent. Kiernan. It has been too long, said the man. Pierrot, good to see you, old friend, Kiernan said as he rose and hugged the man. Kiernan turned toward me and helped me rise from my chair. I heard you claimed a female. I thought it was only a rumor, Pierrot said with a grin as his topaz eyes pierced into mine. This is Charlene, my Luna, Kiernan said, his voice swelling with pride. He had never called me that, and it took me aback for a moment. I smiled and held out my hand in greeting. Che Bellezza, Pierrot spoke, taking my hand and placing a light kiss on my knuckles. I gasped at the temperature of his skin. It was much lower than my own. The eyes, the look, the temperature, it dawned on me, and I grinned. I have never met a Nightwalker. Pleased to meet you, I said. Vampires usually lived secluded lives, and although they were dubbed as Nightwalkers, they did indeed come out during the day despite contrary belief. Pierrot smiled and turned toward Kiernan as if in approval. She is intriguing. A woman who speaks her mind is a woman who can lead. She will be a fantastic Luna, Pierrot said with a smile. I agree, Kiernan said. Pierrot said his goodbyes and wished us well, and then he was gone. His mate, Gisela, gave me her number and requested we all meet again soon. I sat down quietly, letting myself think on the word that meant so much. Luna. It was what we called the alpha female. I would lead an entire pack alongside Kiernan. I thought about longevity for a moment. What would come of us? I blinked away the thoughts when a plate was set in front of me. I picked up my fork and Kiernan gave me a curt nod of encouragement. I twirled the fettuccine on my fork and took a bite, relishing in the flavors. It was delicious. I cleared my throat, feeling it begin to itch. I set my fork down as my throat began to feel as if it were getting tighter, and my oxygen began to slowly be cut off. I gripped Kiernan's forearm as I realized it was swelling, clutching my throat with my right hand. I pushed back from the table as my throat closed and the world around me began to blur. I forced my fingers down my throat, causing myself to gag, and the contents of my stomach came up. I could feel the toxin in my blood as it coursed through my veins, and my body began to weaken. Someone had done this, and it was only happening to me. I could feel Kiernan's hands on me as he lifted me, but I could barely see him. His hazel eyes were huge and trained on me as he shook me, trying to keep me awake. I just wanted to sleep, and so I did. Chapter 8. I sat up quickly, gasping for air, coughing as oxygen found its way into my lungs. The burning sensation of deep breathing caused me to wince. My eyes met Kiernan's relieved ones as he sighed and held me tighter. Poison, I said knowingly. Kiernan nodded, fury still evident in the clenching of his jaw. If you had not thrown it up, you would have died, and I would have annihilated every living thing in that building. Why would someone try to kill me? I asked, confused. I hardly knew anyone. Is it not obvious? You are my mark, my chosen. They know I care for you, Kiernan said. I could not help but smile at his admission. I was beginning to see a different man than the one who had forced his claim on me. I was seeing someone who was learning to trust again, much like myself. So you do have a heart, I said jokingly as I sat up, staring at his face to make light of the situation. He growled lowly at my ability to read him. That is where you are wrong, darling. For my heart has belonged to you since I laid eyes on you. I was stunned into silence. Deep down, I knew he was not how everyone believed him to be, but I still did not completely know how I felt about him. I knew what he was capable of. What would happen if I did something to anger him? Would he just get rid of me? Admittedly, there was something about Kiernan that I was enthralled with, but I could not help but be wary. I watched as he read my emotions. He stood up after placing me on the couch, and I knew I had hurt him. Kiernan, please. I do not know. I sighed at the sound of the door. His growl echoed as he shifted out of anger. I had only just met him, and yet he confused me in more ways than one. He was trying, that was clear to me now more than ever, and I felt like I had just ruined the progress we were making. I stood up, staring in the direction of his lingering scent. I closed my eyes and inhaled it slowly, letting it overtake my senses. I was not afraid of him. I knew he would never hurt me. I turned around quickly, looking for a solution, and saw my father slumped against the hallway wall. Go get him. Do it before you regret letting him go, my father said. I ran out immediately, expecting to see Kiernan's wolf, but I was still at the sight of his human form staring right at me. He stood sure and strong in the light snowfall. Run with me, darling? He asked softly. I smiled gratefully for his patience and stepped down the porch, shifting alongside him. Kiernan's wolf was breathtaking. His beast had alluring hazel gold eyes that would flash black as I drew near, contrasting against his midnight black fur. I nestled my head against his side in comfort, an apologetic gesture. Kiernan closed his eyes, accepting my apology. He rested his snout against me lightly, then growled playfully and nudged me. I growled back and darted forward. Both of us were blindingly fast as we distanced ourselves from the house. We slowed to a trot after a few minutes, the smell of fresh water luring me in. I stopped when my eyes landed on a small wading pool with a waterfall. I waded into the water, which was extremely warm, and shifted back to my human form. I heard Kiernan's low rumble at my boldness as I stood before him. I dove into the water, relishing the warmth as I swam a few yards before coming up for air. I turned, seeing Kiernan at the shallows. The water was at his hips as he moved slowly. I let my eyes travel over his frame, deciding to learn all that he was. His jet-black hair clung to the nape of his neck, and his strong features and light stubble made him look breathtaking. His presence was dominating, his features chiseled yet smooth. His demeanor held a certain darkness, but contained an underlying kindness for me. He grew quiet as he approached. I knew there was no changing things now. I wanted Kiernan, but I knew I was not entirely ready for all that he came with, the responsibility and expectations. I did not know if I could handle being his, but I was going to try. I owed it to myself. Kiernan walked forward until he was mere inches from me, his hands slowly cupping my face. I nearly froze at the feeling of his hands on my skin. Electricity skipped across my body. His hazel eyes bore into mine. I knew what he wanted. I knew that I wanted it too. He leaned in, his lips nearly touching mine, when I placed my finger against his lips. "Oh, darling, you did not think I would make it that easy, did you?" I said, mimicking his nickname for me. He growled in frustration, but grinned down at me. I chuckled as he groaned in annoyance. He released me, lying back as he floated on the surface of the warm water. "Challenge accepted, darling," he yelled over the roaring of the water. Chapter 9. The rest of the evening was interesting, to say the least. It consisted of Chinese takeout and heated looks from Kiernan. He swore that I would be the one to give in and make the first move to further our relationship. Kiernan was playing with the ends of my hair as we lay on the couch, my back against his front, when my parents walked in, both laughing. I smiled at the sight, pleased to see them getting along. My father had decided to stick around to make sure we were well, especially after the incident at Pierrot's. He noticed our position on the couch and cleared his throat. Kiernan sighed quietly at the unspoken hint. It had felt nice to just lie with him as we talked. I chuckled and sat up, Kiernan growling in protest as I moved away to put a slight distance between us. "Tomorrow is your birthday. There is something I must do. Please, come here, Charlene," my father spoke strongly. I stood up slowly, Kiernan nodding with encouragement, obviously knowing what was about to occur. I watched as everyone else flowed into the room, my brothers, Kiernan's parents, Alinda, and Danilo. Everyone watched me with excitement and curiosity. I walked over until I stood in front of my father. He closed the distance and placed his forehead against mine, his palm over my heart. I, Alpha Eric Saxon, relinquish my title to my firstborn and heir, Charlene Saxon, and give her full reign over the Dark Moon Pack, he whispered. I gasped as I felt a shift within me. Energy suddenly coursed through me, and I breathed in quickly at the sensation. I could feel them, my pack. The connection to my people was like a tree. Together we were a strong oak. I was the roots, the foundation, and they were the branches, moving freely because they were well-rooted and protected. I opened my eyes slowly as the feeling subsided into a low, constant hum in the back of my mind. "Whoa," I breathed out. "Alpha Charlene," my father said with a smile, bowing his head in respect to my new title. I smiled and wrapped my arms around him, hugging him firmly. Kiernan stood next to him and shook his hand. I grinned at Kiernan, who smirked back. "Congratulations, darling," Kiernan said, lacing his fingers with mine. "Giving up?" I asked. "Not completely. I have yet to kiss your lips, but I can almost guarantee you will initiate our first," he said. "Oh, Kiernan darling, I have gone 21 years without a boyfriend. I am sure I will be just fine," I said. "You have never kissed anyone?" Alinda yelled in disbelief. I smirked. "I did not say that." Kiernan growled lowly at my answer. "Oh, we all know you are anything but innocent," I said to him. "And I cannot wait to corrupt you," Kiernan replied. Heat rose to my cheeks at his bold words. He gripped my hand, pulling me along to the kitchen. He lifted me with ease, setting me on the counter. Everyone else moved outside, chatting and laughing. He turned around, pulling a small tub of mint chocolate chip ice cream from the freezer, my favorite. He grabbed a spoon and placed the tub in my hands. I watched as Kiernan dug the spoon into the ice cream and held it up to my mouth. I tried to take the spoon, but he growled in protest. I sighed and took the bite, swiping my tongue over my lips to catch any stray dessert. I looked up to see Kiernan looking down at my lips. I could see what he wanted, and what I wanted, too. I let my hand find the collar of his shirt, gripping it lightly as I drew him closer. With a low growl, he closed the distance, but just as he was about to kiss me, a scream rang out. I jumped, and Kiernan cursed at the interruption. Danilo and Alinda bolted out the door, and Kiernan took off after them. I jumped off the counter and followed. I was an alpha now. It was time I acted like one. As soon as I was outside, I saw the reason for the scream. Red stained the grass next to the corpse of a man. Rogues. I watched as they ran toward the tree line where our wolves were emerging. I heard another scream and saw a woman shielding two young girls as two large men circled them. I growled and surged forward, letting my claws extend. I tackled the first man to the ground, slitting his throat in one quick motion. The other man lunged at me, his psychosis evident as he laughed. We fell back, the impact making my head ache. He gripped my hair roughly, examining my mark, and ran his tongue along my neck. I growled and managed to claw his face. He shifted into a wolf above me and snarled. I dove between his legs, stood up, and jumped on his back. I wrapped my arms around his neck, struggling to tighten my grip as he fought me off. He reared back, throwing me against a tree. I gasped as the impact stole my breath. I stood up shakily to see the wolf charging at full speed. I braced myself. I lunged as he jumped, and we hit the ground with a loud thud. I struggled against the snapping jaws of the beast. I closed my fist, letting my claws sink into my palm so my blood trickled down. The beast inhaled, stilling at the scent. I used the opportunity to swipe across his jugular. His whelp echoed, and then it was quiet. I stood up slowly to see everyone watching me. An infuriated Kiernan strode toward me, his hazel eyes smoldering. In a second, his lips were on mine as he held my face between his hands, kissing me with everything he had. Chapter 10. I melted into Kiernan's embrace as his lips moved with mine, relishing the feeling of our contact as pleasurable tingles spread from where we touched. I wrapped my arms around his neck, my fingers tangling in his hair as we kissed. It was as if I was drowning and Kiernan was the precious air I longed for. I gasped softly as his hands moved to my waist, pulling me flush against his body. It felt right being with him, and I regretted that I had not done this sooner. It was natural and organic. Nothing needed to be modified or changed. It was perfect as it was. He pulled away all too soon, his eyes dark and his breathing heavy as he looked at me as if making sure I was actually there. He smoothed the pad of his thumb over my cheek and then my lips. I stood on my tiptoes and kissed him firmly once more, assuring him that I was indeed in front of him and would not be going anywhere. "Oh, my darling Charlene, you will surely be the death of me," Kiernan said. After a while of gathering the rogue bodies, I was exhausted. My father explained that it was my body's way of coping and adjusting to its new power, and that I would need to rest soon. It must have been obvious, because Kiernan practically forced me into his room and told me to shower. When I tried to protest, he growled and said he would bathe me himself if he had to. I had dried blood on me, so I did not protest. I did not want him to see me as clothed as the day I was born. We may have swam in the hot spring, but I had made sure to stay under the water. Did he expect me to sleep with him now? I had no problem sharing a bed, but I was worried about other activities. I do not even know if I am ready for the physical vulnerability that comes with a relationship. I knew Kiernan was far from inexperienced, but I had never been comfortable or secure enough with myself to go to that level with anyone. I sighed as I got out of the shower, throwing on one of Kiernan's large shirts and undergarments before walking out of the restroom. I vowed to get some of my own clothes soon. Alinda had more than plenty for both of us, but I felt odd wearing her things. I paused when I saw Kiernan sitting on his bed, book in hand, as he read silently. I smiled, and he looked up, giving me a smile of his own. I knew if I did not say it now, I would worry about it. "Can I tell you something?" I asked. I watched as he put his book down and nodded. If I was going to trust him, I had to know I could communicate with him, even about things that made me shy. I gathered the courage to say what I needed to say. "I do not think I am ready to have sex," I said bluntly. I watched as Kiernan gave a small smile that was immediately followed by a chuckle. "Charlene, come here, darling," Kiernan said and patted the spot on the bed next to him. I walked over quietly, resting against the headboard as I sat down. Kiernan rolled onto his stomach and looked up at me as he gripped my hand. "Charlene, just because we are embracing our bond as mates, it does not mean I expect you to just fall into bed with me. I enjoy the fact that we are taking things slower than most, and I would never force you into doing something you do not want to do. It has been a while since I have allowed anyone close to me, except my brother, but I—" "You have a brother? Where is he?" I asked in confusion. I noticed how Kiernan stiffened and released my hand as he sat up quickly. He turned his back toward me, hiding his face. My heart lurched at his sudden change in demeanor. "Kiernan?" I asked and reached toward him. He growled as I touched his arm, his large hand encasing mine roughly. His grip caused me discomfort as it tightened quickly. I looked up into black orbs where Kiernan's beautiful hazel eyes were moments ago. "Leave him alone." He yelled at me as he shook me, the movement causing us to fall from the bed and onto the ground. I cried out as his grip tightened. I could feel the pressure on my wrist as he squeezed. He stared down at me, his mouth in a tight line and his jaw clenching as he overpowered me. He was nearly twice my size, and even with the strength of my wolf, his own strength outweighed mine. "Kiernan, you're hurting me," I yelled as I tried to pry my wrist from his grip. I clawed at his wrist, and he let go momentarily, the momentum laying me out on the floor as Kiernan hovered over me. He growled just as the door flew off the hinges. Jameson was in the doorway with my father and Danilo. Kiernan looked down at me, and I watched as he raised his fist. Jameson launched himself at his son, the impact sending them crashing into the wall across the room. The sounds of my mate howling in agony filled my ears. I thought Jameson was hurting him until I stood up and saw that no one was even touching him. Kiernan sat in a fetal position as he cried out in pain and began thrashing against the floor. He was crying as if someone had died. I froze in realization and clutched my wrist to my chest. I looked up to see Elisheva and Alinda standing in the hallway as if this were a recurring nightmare, both with pain in their eyes. Elisheva looked down at my wrist and gasped. I looked down, seeing it swollen and slightly purple, bruises already forming. "Oh, Charlene, baby, come with me." "You do not need to see this," she said as she took me from the scene. She did not even look back as Jameson restrained his son against the floor. Chapter 11. I sighed as Elisheva and Alinda finished bandaging my wrist. It was not broken, just bruised and slightly sore. It would take a couple of hours to properly heal. I looked at Elisheva. I needed to know why, and she sighed knowingly, but I could see the pain in her features as she bit back a sob. They were twins. Kiernan was 5 minutes older than Ezra. While Kiernan was clearly the stronger of the two, Ezra was the more gentle one. I always knew they were complete opposites, but despite that, they had a bond that was so special. It happened 6 years ago on their birthday. Kiernan had just begun seeing Viviana, and he was with her when there was an attack. Ezra went out alone, expecting Kiernan to show up, but Kiernan was too late, and Ezra was outnumbered. It was so bad that he was unrecognizable. "The men who did it got away, and we lost Ezra all in the same day," she said quietly. I could see the sadness in her eyes, and I knew Kiernan blamed himself. I did not know I was crying until I felt the tears. "I am so sorry." "I feel so stupid," I said. "You were going to need to find out sometime." Kiernan was always cold and closed off after that, but when he met you, I immediately saw something change in him. It was small, but it was there. You bring out the side of him I feared we had lost forever. She looked up as Jameson walked in, Kiernan trudging in behind him with sunken eyes and agony on his face. Kiernan's hazel eyes met mine, and the pain in them stilled me. "I am so sorry, Charlene. You have every right to hate me, and I hate myself for not being able to control my wolf," Kiernan spoke. "It is okay, we can." "Not a single thing about this is okay." I thought I was ready, but I am not, and I do not think I ever will be. You do not realize how easy it would have been for me to end your life. How small you are compared to me. It would have been so easy to choke the life out of you, Kiernan growled. I stood quietly because I knew he was right. I am going to leave, Charlene. I do not know when or if I will be back, but I am going to let you go. I am tired of hurting people. If I cannot control myself around you, then I cannot control myself around anyone. You deserve to live a life free of fear. I, Alpha Kiernan Lupin, revoke my claim upon Alpha Charlene Saxon, he said with his eyes closed. I gasped as a wall of pain hit me, emanating from my neck as I fell to the floor. I struggled to breathe as I felt my mark being erased, the feeling comparable to a white-hot branding iron. And suddenly, it was over. I sat up quickly. Kiernan's scent still lingered, but he was no longer in the room. I could feel the panic run through my veins, the sadness evident as I cried out. My wolf felt abandoned. She wanted her mate. I wanted our mate. I felt sick, nausea hitting me in waves as I began dry heaving on the floor. I looked around the room, shock evident on everyone's face as I began to weep. Danilo walked forward, helping me up. He has ordered me to dismiss you from the territory, Charlene. I cannot fight an alpha's order, even if I do not agree with it, Danilo said apologetically. He is not my alpha. I will not take his order, I growled as I shoved him away. I watched as my mother came forward, reading my expression. Oh, baby. This is not happening, I whispered as my tears began to flow. I growled, silencing her. I did not want to speak to anyone or hear any voice that was not Kiernan's. She looked hurt and stood quiet. I just do not understand. How can you just leave someone you claim to care about so easily? I said. You do not. It is a living hell that I can attest to. He will be back. He just needs some time. He cares for you so much that he cannot rein in his emotions, so he does not trust himself around you. As soon as an alpha makes their claim, it is clear that the marked is their equal. They bond. That is something that you just cannot shut off, my father spoke. You are saying the bond made him weak? I asked. If anything, it is the opposite. A female wolf is a treasured thing. She is strong and grounded. She stands firm and does not waver in times of trouble. She thinks with her whole being, her heart, mind, and wolf, and to have one as a mate is truly a gift. You know that no matter what, you will do anything to keep her safe and protected, and she will bring you balance and peace. Especially Aluna. You are the heart and soul of the pack, Jameson said. I sighed at his words. I was going to be. Things were never finalized, and now they never will be. If Kiernan really cared, he would have never denounced me, I said. Charlene, you saw he was not thinking clearly. Please, just stay. He just needs time to think alone. Please, you are the only friend I have got, Alinda said with tears in her eyes. I smiled at her as her hands found mine. She was right, but I knew if I saw Kiernan, I would be the alpha I was born to be, and I would start acting like it. Chapter 12. I jumped as I poured milk into my cereal, Alinda's sudden movement startling me as she came bursting through the door. I had been so used to the quiet house and to being alone that her abruptness left my heart racing. He is here, she said. I knew exactly who she meant. After 23 days, 8 hours, and 13 minutes, Kiernan was back. I could barely fathom that it was possible to miss someone as much as I missed him. I could barely eat the first 2 weeks he was gone. The only things I managed were cereal, sitting on the patio staring at the trees, and sleeping. I knew what I was about to do was bold. I did not even know if it would work entirely, but I was going to try it anyway. I abandoned the gallon of milk on the counter and ran outside with Alinda. Her brother was barely visible in the tree line as he approached, his figure intimidating as he walked with power. My wolf howled in encouragement internally as I bolted forward to meet him, out of earshot from the others. I watched as he placed shorts on, his frame getting closer and closer until I slowed to a jog. I walked forward strongly until he was in arm's reach and I lunged at him, sending him onto his back as I straddled him. I growled, and with one fluid motion, I sank my teeth into his neck, very similarly to how he had once claimed me. Kiernan growled lowly with pleasure, clutching me to him as I used my tongue to clean my mark. He pulled back, looking down at me. "How could you even forgive me?" he asked quietly as his hands rested on my hips. "I am an alpha, and I claimed you as mine, and there is not a thing on this earth that will ever take you away from me. Not even your doubts or fears of loving someone again," I said and silenced his questioning with my lips, kissing him firmly. He sat up, his lips never leaving mine as his arms snaked around me. I felt his tongue brush against my lower lip, asking for entrance, and I let him in without hesitation. He slowed the kiss into a passionate rhythm, his hands on either side of my face. He pulled away, resting his head against mine as he breathed me in. He stood up with me wrapped around his waist, eyes never leaving mine, as he gently placed me on the ground, as our parents and family approached. "I will never hurt you again. I promise you. I am okay now, and I am ready to love you with everything I have," he said to me. I smiled and walked alongside him, lacing our fingers together. I watched as Elishaba launched herself at her son, hugging him tightly. I was caught off guard when she suddenly struck him on his chest. "Don't you ever do that again," she growled. Kiernan smiled and kissed his mother's forehead before releasing her. I watched as Kiernan's eyelids began fluttering. "Wow, I am really sleepy." Kiernan fell back into the snow, nearly taking me down with him. I chuckled as he began snoring, the quick-acting effect of the claim mark presenting itself. I smiled down at him, pleased with myself. Jameson and Danilo hoisted Kiernan's large frame up and carried him inside. I went to follow, but Alinda gripped my hand with a mischievous smile. "Oh no, Charlene, you're coming into town with me. We need to get some things for the house and for you. Let's go." What I thought was a grocery run quickly turned into a much more personal matter. I reddened as Alinda casually walked me down the aisle for protection. "Would you relax? Just so you will be ready when the time comes, if you want to keep yourself safe, because by the way you two were kissing and with mating season approaching, you will definitely be finishing the mating process sooner than later," she said. I hated to admit it, but she was probably right. I turned toward the shelves, seeing so many different types that I was not sure where to even start. Why the hell are there so many? Do they not all work the same? I whispered as I motioned to the number of different boxes. To experiment, of course. When I started getting serious with Danilo, "We got these," she said and tossed me a box. "Trojan Pleasure Pack," I read aloud. "It was a fun night, to say the least," she said, wiggling her eyebrows suggestively. I chuckled and threw the pack into our basket. "Can I ask you how you felt the next day?" I asked quietly. I felt like I was at home. I knew that there was nowhere else I wanted to be. "I knew I loved him with every part of me," she said, smiling at the memory. I smiled as I thought of Kiernan. I think I am ready to take that step with Kiernan. I never realized how much I loved him until I thought I lost him. "I know I am ready, but I have no idea how to go about this," I said, blushing slightly. "Don't worry. Victoria's Secret, here we come," she said with a smirk. Chapter 13. I could not help but feel nervous at dinner. Alinda's excitement was practically tangible as she kept sending knowing glances my way and grinning as we ate. The idea of finishing the mating process had me both nervous and excited. "Are you okay?" Jameson asked his daughter. Alinda just grinned and ate her spaghetti. I stood up and began cleaning the kitchen, gesturing for Alinda to join me. She collected the plates from the table, placing them in the sink quickly. I knew she was trying to give me time to get my thoughts together as I grew nervous. I turned the faucet on to drown out our voices so I could whisper to her. "Obvious much?" I whispered. She was about to respond when the door opened. Blonde hair was the first thing I saw, and I was immediately annoyed. "Why are you here, Viviana?" Alinda growled. "I came for her," she yelled as her eyes landed on me. If she wanted a confrontation, I was not going to back down. This was my home now. These people were my family. Alinda stepped towards her, but I pulled her behind me. "If you have something you would like to say, you can say it to me." "I am not afraid of you," I said. "You should be." "I can end you," she growled. "Try me," I countered, stepping closer. My father and Jameson moved forward, but I held my hand up to them. This would continue to happen until I dealt with it myself. Oh, I already did. Tell me, did you like your pasta at Piero's? It had a nice kick, did it not? She whispered. I had enough. I gripped her by the neck and walked her forward, tightening my hold as she struggled. I opened the door and pushed her onto the pavement. I will deal with you later. Right now I am enjoying my family, so get away from my house and do not go near any one of them, especially Kiernan. He is mine. Have a nice night, I said firmly and slammed the door shut. I turned around to see Kiernan at the bottom of the stairs, awake from his nap. He was smirking at my rant. I quickly understood how easily my wolf could make decisions. Even now, I felt the urge to protect what was mine. Somebody is possessive, he said, wiggling his eyebrows. Do not act like you are not enjoying this, I said. Having my mate proclaiming to every female that I am hers? No, I am not enjoying this at all, he said, laughing. I watched as he grabbed a bowl from the counter. I realized he was hovering near the bag of items Alinda was supposed to put away. I froze when his hand moved toward the bag, but I sighed in relief when he pulled out a tube of toothpaste instead. I heard Alinda chuckle, and I sent her a pleading look. Get everyone out of here, please, I whispered to her. She nodded and spoke aloud. I made a peach cobbler earlier. Would you guys like to come by the cabin for some? We have ice cream, too. Everyone nodded and began leaving the house. Danilo grinned knowingly at me. I gripped Kiernan's hand as he began to walk, and I pulled him back. You are not going anywhere, I said. He looked confused, and I stepped forward to kiss him softly. I have missed you. I want to spend time alone with you, I said. He smiled and pressed a kiss to my forehead. It has been a long day. Why don't you go get ready for bed, and I will finish cleaning the kitchen, he said. I kissed him once more before walking up the stairs. I hurriedly showered and got ready. I stared at myself in the mirror, taking a deep breath. He loved me as I was, so I should too. I placed the items from the store in the bedside table just as I heard Kiernan entering the room. I sat on the corner of the bed, trying my best to appear confident. The door opened, and he froze when he saw me, his eyes changing color as they raked down my frame. Charlene, he said lowly. Kiernan, I said quietly. I stood up and walked over to him, kissing him. He responded by pulling me closer. I broke the kiss and looked up into his eyes as I helped him remove his shirt. Charlene, one more kiss and there will be no going back, he warned. I smiled and kissed him in response. He pulled away, grinning his handsome grin, and spoke the words I never thought I would hear from the man of legends. I love you. Chapter 14. I could not help but grin as Kiernan slept beside me, my head resting on his bare chest. I was officially his Luna. Our packs were now one. I closed my eyes, reminiscing on the previous night. We had hardly slept, the memory of our connection still fresh in my mind. I did not think it possible that so much love and pleasure could be caused by one person. I touched my neck where Kiernan had placed his mark. It was still a bit sore, but it was made with the best intent. I opened my eyes at the sound of Kiernan's deep baritone laugh. Good morning, my darling Luna, he said. I looked up at him and kissed him softly. Good morning, Alpha Kiernan. He smirked as his hold on me tightened. I chuckled and looked at the clock, seeing it was 3 minutes past noon. Good afternoon, I corrected. We should probably get up before they send a search party for you, he whispered. Oh, I am pretty sure your sister has that covered, I said with a grin. You do realize that means the entire pack must know by now, he said. I actually do not care, I replied with a shrug. Kiernan grinned and chuckled when my stomach growled. Shower and then food, he asked. I nodded as he playfully lifted me over his shoulder and carried me toward the bathroom. After a while, I came out of the shower and walked downstairs. Everyone was in the kitchen eating lunch. My mother flashed me a knowing smile just as my father walked in. Well, good afternoon, Luna Charlene, my father said. I reddened, and as if on cue, a bare-chested Kiernan walked into sight. If his huge grin was not a giveaway, the marks on his shoulder blades certainly were. I immediately darted for the kitchen. Well, damn Charlene, Alinda said at the sight of her brother's back. Kiernan sent me a wink, and I opened the fridge door in desperation to hide my blush. Congratulations is what they are all trying to say, Elishaba said, smiling. She is just saying that because she wants grandchildren already, Alinda added. I had not even thought of that. I knew I wanted a big family one day, but I did not know if I was quite ready yet. You do want pups, right? It is your body and your choice, Elishaba said quietly. I definitely want pups. I always loved the idea of having a big family, I said. Kiernan smiled at my answer as he served us plates. We all turned as Danilo walked in. He bowed to Kiernan and me. Alpha Luna, there is a small cluster of wolves and women approaching from the east. Also, Viviana is running amok, threatening members of the pack. Danilo spoke with irritation. I will handle Viviana. Kiernan, you go handle the wolves, I said as I put my hair into a bun. Charlene, if she hurts you. I have had to defend myself my entire life, Kiernan. I can handle it. I love you, I said and kissed him briefly before jogging outside with Alinda. I heard Viviana growl before I saw her. Her body collided with mine, and I chuckled as she swung at me. Her weak blows barely grazed my face. I shoved her backwards and stood up, positioning myself for her attack. I wanted this over quickly. I waited as she advanced, ducking past her arms and striking her across the face as hard as I could. I heard a crack as my fist collided with her nose. She hit the floor, screaming as she held her bleeding face, then walked away on wobbly legs. An unfamiliar scent hit my nose, and I saw a group of men approaching, led by a dark-haired man who was clearly an alpha. I growled a warning. You are intruding on Lupin territory. Who are you, and what is your business here? I questioned. I am Alpha Aronas. We have heard a rumor of a female shifter amongst these lands. I am here to claim her as my own, he said firmly. I felt Alinda's tension through our bond. Where did you hear this rumor? I asked. He stood quietly while one of his men spoke up. You dare question our alpha without showing him the proper respect? The man growled and stepped toward me. She is my Luna. Touch a hair on her head, and you will die, a venom-soaked voice spoke. Kiernan walked into sight, his jaw tight. He stood next to me, glancing over me quickly. I nodded, reassuring him I was fine. He turned to the man who questioned me. You dare to question my mate and Luna? You will learn to silence your mouth in the midst of a higher-ranked wolf, or I will rid you of your tongue. Know your place on my territory, Kiernan growled. The man fell back behind his alpha, eyes wide with fear. Now, what is your business here? I asked again. I would like to make a trade for the female shifter. I will trade 3 of my finest women for her. I stepped to the side, peering behind him. I was appalled at the state of the women. The oldest could not have been more than 17. There will be no trade, for the woman you seek is not for trade, Kiernan said. I could not just leave the girls. I gripped Kiernan's hand, and he squeezed it back. Please, leave the girls in my pack. Save you the trouble on the journey back home, Kiernan offered. Not without a trade. I know that the shifter is here. I never thought they were strong enough, the man said, laughing. I felt the anger urging me to shift. I felt Kiernan squeeze my hand lightly. Do it, he whispered. I smirked as I released his hand, letting my shift take over. I sprouted into my dark brown wolf that stood nearly as tall as Kiernan's shoulder. I watched as the males stepped back, surprise and fear evident on their faces. Had they expected me to be weak? I would not stifle my power anymore. I growled as the men tensed. I circled around Kiernan, stopping behind him to shift back to human form. Alinda immediately placed a shirt over my head and handed me shorts. I crossed my arms as I stared at the men. I knew why Kiernan told me to do it. Aronas and his men were the type who manipulated people looking for protection. The women were his means of trying to build a pack. Kiernan was not going to let him walk away. Aaron would not live to see another day. Chapter 15. I knew the girls were still afraid after seeing Kiernan take care of Aronas, but I tried to reassure them that they were safe now and were more than welcome to join us. Anyone who had not seen something like that before would be afraid, much like I had been, but after a while, they calmed down. I made them some dinner, and Alinda and Elishaba took them on a tour around the packlands. I could see the hope growing in their eyes. Kiernan walked in, muscles on full display as he grabbed a water bottle from the fridge and drank the entire thing while eyeing me from across the room. I knew what he was thinking as he approached, and I could not help but laugh as he lifted me onto the counter, stepping between my legs as he kissed me. I wrapped my hands around his neck as we kissed, and I felt his hands lingering at the hem of my shirt. I pulled away, lifting my shirt over my head and tossing it to the side. He kissed my neck softly as I ran my hands down the muscles of his stomach. I jumped when I heard a gasp. I turned to see our parents, Alinda, Danilo, and Piero standing by the back door. I jumped off the counter, struggling to find my shirt as Kiernan zipped his pants quickly while cursing. I saw my shirt on the ground next to my father, and Alinda saved me the embarrassment by tossing it to me, an amused grin on her face. I put it on quickly and stood up straight, hands on my hips in annoyance at the interruption. "What?" Kiernan growled as he steadied his breathing. "We just wanted you to know that your plans are all set. Guests will be arriving in approximately 3 hours," Alinda said quietly. "And it took all of you?" Kiernan growled, much to my amusement. "Plans for what?" I asked. "I am throwing you a belated birthday dinner at Piero's. I am also going to formally introduce you as my mate and Luna," Kiernan said. "You did not have to do that," I said to him, smiling. "You deserve to be shown off like the gem you are, darling." Half of the people invited are alphas and lunas who thought my pack and I were mere rumors. "It should be interesting," Kiernan said with a smirk. "Promise you won't hurt anyone?" I asked. "Because this event is in your honor, I will stay my hand, but if someone dares lay a hand on you, I will end them in a second," Kiernan said. "It is a deal," I said, chuckling. "Time to get you dressed," Alinda said and gripped my hand. I pecked Kiernan's lips just as his sister ran upstairs with me, pulling me into one of the spare rooms. It took Alinda nearly the entire time to get me ready. I was surprised to learn Kiernan had chosen my dress. It was beautiful and more daring than what I would have chosen for myself. Alinda explained that the entire reason he chose it was to show others what they could not have. I rolled my eyes but found humor in it. It was a gorgeous off-white lace that hugged my figure and draped off my shoulders, cascading into a beautiful bodice that reached the floor. My makeup was dark and smoky, my eyes contrasting against the blended colors. We walked toward the entrance hurriedly after the drive, Alinda pulling me behind her as she grinned at the security. They did not dare to question her. Instead, they bowed in respect as we passed. Alinda smiled as she saw Danilo in a striking black tuxedo. I felt a tap on my shoulder, and I knew exactly who it was as his scent flooded my senses. I stood on my tiptoes, gripping Kiernan by his tuxedo collar as I kissed him. I pulled away to see him smiling down at me. "You look incredibly gorgeous, as I assumed you would," he said, his smile making him even more handsome. I kissed his lips again, softly in response. He deepened the kiss as the sound of Alinda and Danilo's retreating footsteps faded. He pulled away, resting his head against mine. "You are so precious to me," he said. "I love you too," I whispered and laced my arm into his as we began to walk. I watched as Kiernan's expression became serious as we walked towards 2 huge doors guarded by members of our pack. I could see them searching a couple as they entered. "Calm yourself, love. It is just a precaution after the last time we were here. In a room full of high-ranked wolves, emotions can run high. Simple arguments can lead to trouble, and I do not wish for that tonight. I want us to have fun," he said to me. I nodded. He was right. Expecting there not to be at least an argument would have been foolish. Shoving so much power into one room meant someone was bound to get angered. "But if at any point you feel uncomfortable, call my name, and I will be there," he said. I kissed him once again and smiled at him as the doors opened. We were led to an entirely different part of the building, standing above everyone else on the edge of a marble stairway. I noticed every single person was dressed in black attire except for me. I gripped Kiernan's arm tighter as we slowly walked down the stairs. I knew people were beginning to recognize Kiernan as the infamous alpha they had only heard of in stories. I watched as heads started to turn toward us. Kiernan's power was evident in his aura as it radiated throughout the room. Kiernan was breathtaking. His size, power, and looks caused intense gazes throughout the room. I could feel the unmistakably sharp feel of envy in the air as the women's eyes landed on my mark. What surprised me most was that many of the looks were coming from mated females. I could not help but feel proud. He was mine. Chapter 16. I smiled to see Alinda and Danilo in the corner near tables filled with all sorts of food. They were the only ones eating while everyone still seemed somewhat tense and untrusting. Everyone else was still skeptical as they watched us walk through the room, grouped together, whispering to the few people they knew. Alinda squealed at the sight of us, her voice breaking the silence as she ushered me forward. I chuckled as she kissed my cheek in excitement. This is so awesome. We look great, and we both have the best dates, she said with a grin. I looked down at the cookie in her hand and the glass of wine in the other. I knew Alinda loved sweets, so I was not surprised to see her raiding the table, and I gladly joined her. How many have you had? I asked. Stopped counting when she got to 7, Danilo answered for her. I chuckled as she kissed Danilo's cheek. I felt someone tap me and turned to see Pierrot with his mate, Gisela. Kiernan shook both their hands while I hugged them and thanked them for hosting and joining us. I parted ways from Kiernan momentarily as he spoke with Jameson, and I walked over to the bar for a glass of wine. A couple approached me, looking nervous. You must be Luna Charlene, the woman said. I smiled, trying to make her feel relaxed as I nodded my head. I am Alpha Solomona, and this is my mate, Luna Katrine, the man said. Thank you for coming. Pleased to meet you both, I said. Katrine grinned, her brown eyes lighting up, and I watched as her eyes suddenly grew wide as she looked behind me. I chuckled as Kiernan's familiar scent hit me and his hand found my hip as he kissed my temple. Kiernan, this is Alpha Solomona and Luna Katrine, I said. Kiernan's chiseled features softened, and he flashed them a smile, hand extended. Solomona slowly shook it, but I noticed how he positioned himself in front of Katrine as if Kiernan would attack them. He is not going to hurt you, I said quietly. I could not help but chuckle as Katrine growled at her mate, shoving him out of the way slightly as she shook Kiernan's hand. Kiernan thanked them for coming and invited them to sit with us, as they appeared to be without company. I smiled as Kiernan walked me to a table. He had just sat down when a loud growl sounded, and I watched as 2 men started to scuffle in the corner of the room. Go, I said, grinning before Kiernan could even speak. He smirked, kissing my lips firmly before he left. He is nicer than I thought he would be, Solomona said. To me, yes. But do not take his kindness for naivety. He does not stand for disrespect, I said. As no one should, Solomona said with a smirk. I could feel the wine setting in, making me feel warm after a glass. I motioned Alinda over, and she sat with them. Please, excuse me for a moment, I said with a smile. I was in the restroom washing my hands when a woman walked up beside me. I gave her a smile, and she scoffed. You Lupins sicken me, she spoke as she fixed her auburn curls. You were not forced to come, I said, looking into her dark brown eyes. I had no choice. My brother is Alpha and wanted to see Alpha Lupin for himself. He wanted to see what everyone is afraid of. And honestly, I don't see much to fear, she said, drawing closer until our noses nearly touched. Your ignorance shall prove itself in due time, I am sure of it, I said with a grin. I walked out and began to make my way back to the banquet hall, stopping only when I felt a harsh grip on my arm. I looked up to see familiar eyes and auburn hair, and I knew it was the woman's brother immediately. I growled at him warningly, yanking my arm from his grasp. He gripped my arms roughly and growled in my face, trying to intimidate me as he lifted me off the ground. I stood my ground, watching as a huge body suddenly planted itself behind the man. Hazel eyes burned with anger as Kiernan looked down at him. Put her down, Kiernan growled. The man grinned, dropping me on my feet. Before Kiernan could move, I swiped my clawed hand across the man's face, scratching deep enough to leave a scar just before I kicked him. The man growled in pain as he clutched his face and dropped to his knees. Do not put your hands on me. Try it again, and you will lose a hand, I growled, moving next to Kiernan. The woman ran forward, attempting to grab me, but Alinda intercepted her and shoved her back by the throat until she fell to the ground. The woman growled once more before turning and retreating with her injured brother. Kiernan turned towards me, eyes trained on my arms. "I am okay," I said, but I could see that he was not. His body was shaking with anger. I could see Kiernan struggling against his wolf. Without thinking, I pulled him against me, kissing him firmly to calm him. I wrapped my arms around his neck and deepened the kiss until I felt his arms wrap around my body, holding me against him. I pulled away slowly and opened my eyes. "I love you, Charlene," he said. "I know. Now let us have some fun," I said with a smile. Chapter 17. I sighed as I woke up. Not seeing Kiernan next to me was weird, and my head was pounding. I had been waking up with headaches for the past week. By the time I got out of the shower and dressed, it was almost 8. A low burning in my abdomen was coming and going, and I felt nauseous. We had invited Katrine and Solomona to stay with us for the week to form an alliance, and because I enjoyed their company. I walked downstairs, greeted by my new friends and family. "Want some eggs or pancakes, love?" Elisheba asked as she stood over a skillet. "No, thank you. I do not have much of an appetite. I think I am sick. My head is pounding," I said. "Come here, darling," Elisheba said. She was extremely intelligent and had studied medicine. She gripped my face, staring into my eyes, then placed her hand against my forehead. "It is not the drinks from yesterday, Charlene. Your heat has begun." "It is baby-making time," Alinda said, grinning as Kiernan walked in. "Can I ask you something privately?" Elisheba asked, directing me into the pantry. She shut the door quickly. "Did you mate last night?" My blush gave away the answer. "Have you been using contraceptives?" "No," I trailed off. I felt myself panicking. A baby could be forming as we spoke. "Come on, honey, you do not look so good," Elisheba said. "I cannot have a pup. What if I am not ready? Please keep this to yourself until I know for sure. Please do not say anything to Kiernan," I said. "Honey, calm down. Everything is going to be fine. Let us get some food in you," she said, walking me out. I could hardly take care of myself. How could I care for a baby? Kiernan Lupin's baby. I did not even know if he wanted pups. I needed fresh air. I walked out of the house, ignoring the questions, and sat on the porch. I watched the children of the pack run by, laughing. I tried to imagine what our pups would look like. I focused on the horizon and squinted as I saw figures approaching. I felt Kiernan next to me. "Who are they?" I asked. "The only reason they would be here is that something has happened that they do not approve of," Kiernan said quietly. "The council. They are the enforcers of our kind." Danilo, Jameson, and my father strode toward us. I followed them off the porch, freezing when I saw one of the council members, a tall, golden-haired man with fierce blue eyes, holding a blade against Kiernan's neck. A small trickle of blood made its way down Kiernan's skin. "Please do not." "Please," I said, putting myself between them. "You are his Luna," the man stated in disbelief. "Yes. If you have a question, you can ask me," I said, gripping the blade and slowly bringing it down. The man nodded and sheathed it. "We hear your mate hides a female shifter." "We demand to see her," he said. I knew I could not lie. Kiernan growled at me, but I looked at him with acceptance. "It is me," I said. The man's eyes shifted down. "Prove it." I breathed in deeply, focusing on my shift, but my wolf refused. I tried and failed again. "I cannot." "I am not sure what is wrong," I said. "How about a little help?" the man said. I screamed as electricity coursed through my body. My skin felt as if it were on fire. It was over in seconds, but my body was still coursing with pain. I fell to the floor, my muscles contracting. I felt sick and began cramping immediately. Elisheba dropped to the ground next to me, her hand over my stomach. "I need to check her out." "I think she is pregnant," Elisheba said. Kiernan was frozen, eyes trained on my stomach. Then he launched himself at the councilman. I could not bring myself to look. I did not need a checkup. I could feel it. I looked down, seeing my jeans soaked red at my inner thigh. My pelvic region burned with sharp pain. My father lifted me without hesitation as Elisheba barked orders. I felt myself spiraling. The moment he set me down, I barricaded myself in the bathroom. I stood under the hot shower, watching as the water ran crimson down the drain. I cried, feeling the loss as it left me. I felt broken. I shut the shower off when the water finally ran clear. I stepped out, crying when I saw Kiernan seated on the edge of the tub. His hands and shirt were covered in the dried blood of the councilman. He looked up at me, tears staining his face. "I am sorry," I whispered. He pulled me into his arms. "Sho, darling, you are not to blame. None of this is your fault," he said as he held me. Chapter 18. I sighed as everyone ate dinner around me in silence, the events of the morning still haunting us. Elisheba estimated that I had been about 8 days along after checking me over. An alpha female's pregnancy only lasted 12 weeks, so the pup had just begun developing. Elisheba said she could tell my body was healing already, but I hated that. I watched the condensation roll off my glass in beads, wetting the coaster beneath it as I thought of what could have been. I could hear my father calling my name, so I looked up slowly. He was about to speak when a loud banging sounded from the door. I turned, seeing Viviana slapping her hands on the glass sliding door that led to the porch. I was sick and tired of people pushing me around. She had tried to hurt me and even kill me. I was done with her, and I certainly was not in the mood to deal with her nonsense. She needed to learn her place, because clearly she was not understanding my patience from before. I stood up, opening the sliding door and pushing her out onto the porch. "You want Kiernan, right? The only way you will have him is by killing me, so come do it," I spoke firmly. She stood still, watching me quietly. "Come do it. Now is your chance. Come and get me." I watched as a look of hate etched itself onto Viviana's face. She pulled a knife out and began walking towards me, revealing her true intentions. I shifted in the blink of an eye, knocking the blade away from her as I lunged, pinning her against the ground. She struggled, and I struck her across the face, the force of the blow knocking her head against the wood of the porch. She whined in pain. She was terrified, closing her eyes as she thought I was going to kill her, but I was not. I was so tired of death. I shifted human, looking down at her. "Whether you like it or not, I am your Luna, and you will respect my relationship, and you will respect this family and me. This is the only chance I will give you, Viviana. I am so tired of disrespect and all this hate you harbor. I will not stand for it any longer. I know we will never be friends, but you are my pack member, and it is my duty to take care of my people. The next time you act out of line will be your last in this pack," I said, standing up and holding my hand out to her. She took it slowly, bowing her head in respect. "Yes, Luna," she said, before walking away in a hurry. I sighed, not even caring about my lack of clothing as I walked back up the porch. Kiernan placed a towel around me. I walked inside past the stunned faces of everyone else. I felt a low burn in my abdomen as I put on a long shirt. Kiernan's scent suddenly became more appealing, and the thought of him had me unsettled. I knew he caught my scent change because he walked in quietly, eyes dark as he breathed in my scent. He walked up to me, his breath fanning over my neck as he grew closer, wrapping his arms around me knowingly. "She made an attempt on your life, and you let her live." "Why?" Kiernan asked. "There has been enough death. We need to celebrate the life around us. I am tired of dwelling on the negative. I am your Luna, Kiernan. I will carry myself as one. We lost something, but we have an opportunity to try again. If you wish to," I said quietly. "Are you asking me if I wish for you to carry my pup?" he asked, eyes seeking mine. "I think there is a time for everything, Kiernan, and I think it is time we brought some light into this world. That is, if you are ready to try again," I said. He smiled widely, gripping my cheeks between his hands and kissing me softly. "Charlene, I would love nothing more than for you to be the mother of my pups. I only pray our pup inherits your ways, because it will be the most beautiful pup in existence," he said, smiling. "I say we just continue as we have been, and if it is meant to be, it will happen," I said. In response, he pressed his lips to mine, showing his answer. Chapter 19. I growled as I ran in my human form, leading a few of the pack members in a final sprint toward the house. I decided it was best I not shift for the time being. Risking myself being seen would be good for no one. It had been almost 2 weeks, and I was beginning to feel like myself again. Piero informed us that many of the packs are lingering, stuck on a rumor of a female wolf shifter. Only those in our pack would know of my ability for the time being. Even now, as I slowed toward the house, Kiernan was speaking with alphas from Europe. I walked into the house quickly, ignoring Kiernan's grin as the alphas watched me with curiosity. "Your sister?" one of the men asked. Kiernan chuckled quietly. "Don't you wish?" "That beauty is my mate," Kiernan said proudly. The scent of jealousy hit the air, and I could not help but smirk as Kiernan sent me a wink. "And you two have finished the mating process?" the same guy asked. "I do not appreciate how interested you are in my mate. You will hold your tongue in my house or accept your defeat in the challenge," Kiernan spoke firmly. I watched as the man's gaze landed on me once more, defying Kiernan. I growled loudly at him. "You are in our house. You will respect his wishes or leave," I said strongly. The man went to protest, but the scream of Alinda met my ears. I immediately bolted outside, Kiernan right on my trail. I had just stepped outside when the unmistakable sound of a gunshot sounded. "Charlene," I heard in Kiernan's strained voice. I turned, gasping when I saw the wound in his chest, and his eyes wide with fear as he dropped to his knees. I cried out as I tried to hold him up, trying to keep him awake. I could feel my face already wet with tears as Kiernan struggled to stay conscious. I took my tank top off, leaving me in my sports bra as I held the shirt against his wound. "Jameson. Elishaba. Mom." I yelled out as I watched Kiernan lose his life before my eyes. I looked up to see the alphas standing there in shock. I could not lose him. "I need you to move, honey," Elishaba said as she shook me from my thoughts. I looked down at Kiernan's pale face. "If you don't move, he will die," Elishaba yelled. I let go, letting her take control as she and two others hoisted Kiernan up and ran off with him. I turned to see Jameson, his hands red with blood as he stood next to me protectively. "What is happening? Where are the gunshots coming from?" I growled. "Sniper. He has to be hidden amongst the trees on that mountain adjacent to the house," Jameson growled. I immediately turned toward the alphas. "You are coming with me. Leave the shooter for me," I spoke as I tried to shift, but I failed to do so. I could still feel the bond between Kiernan and me, so I knew he was alive for the time being. I also knew how risky it would be for me to run toward the people trying to kill us, especially knowing that I might be carrying a pup. I froze in my tracks, watching as the other alphas ran on, and I realized I could not shift even if I wanted to. I turned at Alinda's voice as she approached with a bandaged Danilo and a furious Jameson. "You are carrying a pup, are you not? You cannot shift. You should not be out here," Jameson said. "My inability to shift does not stop me from knowing how to fight, and fight I will for my mate," I said. I watched as my mother ran out, her arms covered in blood. "Come quickly," she practically yelled at me. I got inside the house before she did, gasping in shock when I saw Kiernan standing up on the surgery table, ripping the morphine line from his arm. The hole that was previously in his chest was healed over, and he was up and furious, as if it had never happened. He leaped from the table and landed in front of me. "How? He looks perfectly fine. What happened?" I asked. "We are just as confused as you. He was gone for 2 minutes and now," my mother said quietly. I smoothed my hand over Kiernan's chest, feeling the warmth beneath my fingertips. He placed his hand on my stomach lightly, closing his eyes as he breathed in my scent. He kissed my lips before stepping outside. I went to follow, but felt myself stop abruptly. I looked down, growling when I saw I was restrained to the table with a zip tie. I yanked against it until it gave way to my strength, and I was free. I ran out to see Kiernan already coming from the tree line as he held a man by the throat. Kiernan was a blur as he slammed the man down onto the earth. The body made a sickening crack as it made contact with the ground. Kiernan lifted the man by the neck as he yelled at him, then put him out of his misery after the man answered. Kiernan walked toward me, his anger evident on his face, but his eyes softening as they landed on me. "What did he tell you?" I asked. "What I suspected. There is a bounty on you," Kiernan said. "On me? Why?" I asked, confused. "They know you are the shifter. Many people want you as their mate, but for that to happen, I have to be dead," Kiernan said. "How are you still here?" I asked, still not understanding. When a female and male alpha mate, their bond tethers their lives together if the moon deems it necessary. I lived because you live, but if I die, you will too, I finished. Chapter 20. Someone put a price on her. No one knows who, but when they get her, they are supposed to contact the buyer, who will name the meeting location. There are nearly 36 people bidding on her, and the price drops every 5 hours as an incentive, Jameson spoke. How do you know this? Kiernan asked his father. I encountered the sniper's partner. He was trying to flee. He is in custody. What would make someone want to kidnap a mated woman? I asked in disgust. $6 million, Jameson answered. My jaw dropped. For me? I am not that special. I cannot even shift right now. I yelled, immediately regretting my slip of the tongue. You are pregnant? Elishaba and my mother yelled at the same time, both of them grinning. Alinda squealed as I nodded, a blush creeping onto my face as Kiernan sent me a wink and a smile. Jameson smiled as Elishaba shook him happily. We are going to have a grandchild. Oh, your first pup. I am so excited. How are you? Do you feel okay? Do you need anything? I sure ate a lot of brownies when I was pregnant with Alinda, Elishaba said. That is probably why she is so hyper and eats chocolate like it gives her sustenance, Jameson mumbled. I chuckled when Alinda growled at her father in defense. I still do not understand why people are so interested in me, I said. Besides your shifting ability, it is not you, but rather what you can do, I heard from Pierrot. I watched as he practically glided in. You all forget I have lived nearly 1,000 years. I knew the first of your kind. You are not the first woman shifter. There was a woman many years ago with the same ability. An alpha forced himself upon her, and she later bore a daughter, a female alpha, and then she later bore another girl, also able to shift. It was unheard of, and they were all later found dead. What does that have to do with me? I asked. Because, unlike her, you are also a Luna, the mate of the alpha. But because you were an alpha first in your own right, every child you bear with an alpha male, whether it be male or female, will inherit the ability to shift and so on in your line, Pierrot said. They want her for breeding. They do not know she is pregnant. They are going to come after the baby next, Kiernan spoke aloud. When I heard that, I was immediately furious. I just did not understand how people could be so disgusting. I am not a machine. I have a personality and feelings. I am a human being. I would like to see those people try to touch my mate or my pup. I will rip out their heart myself if someone dares to even think about harming my child, I growled, feeling my wolf want to come forward. I focused on the hardwood floor, trying my best to calm down. I knew it had to be the hormones because for the last week, my moods had been changing so quickly. I had not even realized my fists were balled until I saw the wood beneath me collect a few drops of red. I looked down to see my clawed fingers curled into my palm. I growled lowly as I breathed out slowly. Kiernan was watching me with an impressed smirk. Your hormones are already making you a feisty mama. I like it, Alinda said with a grin. I watched as Kiernan watched me with a smile. His hard stare caused my wolf to perk up, knowing the pleasure he could bring. It had me shifting on my feet uncomfortably, feeling the need for him spike. He knew exactly what he was doing to me too. Asshole, I growled out, more mad at myself and my lack of control over my desire for Kiernan. Your language sure is colorful now, I heard in a voice that I had not heard since I was a teenager. Alejo? I yelled in disbelief. He was the beta to the first pack we were in, but we were kicked out after 8 years when the alpha tried to force himself on me when I was only 15. I launched myself at my old friend, grinning as he lifted me off the ground. What are you doing here? I asked. Kiernan called me about his banquet. I told him I would still bring a gift for the lovely Luna he spoke of, who sounded oddly familiar. He said with a grin. You are the alpha? I asked. I took over a few months after you left. I tried to find you and invite you both back, but you were impossible to track down, he said. Things are good now. I am happy, I said, grinning as Kiernan smiled at me. I watched as Alejo suddenly took on a hard stare and moved past me quickly. I jumped when his fist collided with my father's jaw. My father accepted the blow as he staggered with a nod, wiping his split lip with the back of his hand. I am sure they spared you the details of everything they have had to go through. You do not understand the things she has had to go through as a child. The constant bullying, the men who tried to force themselves upon her when she was still a young girl. You were not there, I was. I was there when she cried herself to sleep. I was there when she asked why her father did not want her like all the other kids' fathers wanted them. All the fights she has been in, defending her mother and a man she did not even know. I just hope you learn to cherish what you have in front of you now. You do not deserve this second chance, Alejo growled. My father's eyes reached mine, hearing the details of the life I lived. My mother broke the silence as she came forward, greeting Alejo with a kiss on the cheek and a hug. You are even more beautiful than I remembered, he told her. I could not help but wonder if he still loved her. He was always kind to her and treated me as if I were his own daughter. My mother said something, and he looked past her, eyes wide with excitement. You are going to have a pup? He asked, smiling. I nodded as Kiernan stood proudly next to me. I always knew you would be an excellent mother. Even when she was a kid herself, she would walk into town every day and read to the children in the library for hours. I chuckled at the memory. Those were some good times. Alex, have you heard any rumors up north? Anything about a female shifter? Kiernan asked, turning the topic to something more serious. I watched as Alejo's smile faded. There is an alpha that just took over for his father. He was rumored to want to challenge you for your mate, but everyone knew he would not win. He said he wanted to finish what his father had started. Who is he? I asked. I do not know exactly. They have never tried to form an alliance, he said. I am disliked by many. That could be anyone, Kiernan said. Well, we have some work to do then, do we not? I spoke. Chapter 21. I don't know if it was my hormones or not, but I had been wanting Kiernan in more ways than one. It was like I couldn't get enough of him. I grinned, relaxing my breathing as he kissed his way back up my thigh and across my abdomen slowly. I laughed as Kiernan kissed my neck, his jaw covered in a light stubble that I was growing to love. We have to wait until I reach 3 weeks for an ultrasound to be accurate, since mates of an alpha carry for at least 12 weeks, so 1 more week and we get to see our growing pup. My belly wasn't obvious to the human eye, but my stomach wasn't as toned as it was 2 weeks ago. It was only slightly protruding. It was more than obvious to the wolves because my scent changed. After showering and changing, we headed downstairs. I chuckled as Kiernan carried me outside, the sun shining on my face as he set me on the porch table next to my father and mother, my mother resting against my father's chest as he sat. My father finally ended things with Emmeline. It was a mutual end, my father revoking his claim and Emmeline running off immediately with my father's old beta. My brothers were more than welcome here, but they spent the majority of their time traveling. I smiled, seeing the claim mark that now sat upon my mother's neck. It wasn't faded as it once had been. It was how it always should have been. Things were good. We were happy. Kiernan paused to kiss my lips. We're going to run down the road to get some things from the market. I'll be back in half an hour, he said. I smiled and kissed him again. Today, tomorrow, and forever. He whispered to me before kissing my head as he and Danilo left. I smiled as I watched him walk away, admiring my mate and his beautiful backside until he got into his truck. I chuckled when Alinda sat down in front of me, her big hazel eyes blinking widely at me. Have you picked out a name yet? She asked me. We don't even know if our pup is a girl or a boy yet, I said. Oh, it's so exciting, she said, clapping her hands together. I watched as Jameson came striding up to us quickly, and my father-in-law greeted us warmly. There's a small group running along the southern part of the territory. They don't seem threatening at all, but for extra precautions and since you are carrying Charlene, I request you both go inside, Jameson spoke before shifting and bolting behind the house. Alinda nodded quickly, and we both moved inside, ushering the stray pack members, mostly teens and children, inside our house for safety as we drew the blinds closed. I immediately caught the scent of blood, coming to a slow halt as I analyzed my surroundings. I nearly jumped when a loud thumping echoed from above us. The young girl of the pack I recognized as Sashana cried out in fear, and I growled lowly. Into the coat closet. Now, I ordered, knowing they would only put themselves in more danger out in the open. Alinda ushered the few of them into the closet, shutting it quietly. She stood with her back against mine as we walked slowly up the stairs. Instructed her to go down the opposite end of the hallway and check that side of the house where we were building the nursery. The scent was coming from Kiernan's room, and I opened the door quickly in one swift motion. I gasped in shock, seeing who I momentarily thought was Kiernan, bloodied and barely alive, but his scent was different, and his features were softer, and his hair was visibly shorter. I knew who it had to be, but I couldn't believe it. Ezra? I whispered in disbelief. I jumped when his eyes popped open, and he growled, thrusting himself up quickly, but staggering as he held his leg. His eyes scanned me quickly, on alert and full of fear of what was to come next. I'm not gonna hurt you, Ezra. I'm Charlene, I whispered. How do you know my name? He whispered. I'm Kiernan's maid, I said. I watched as he froze at the mention of his twin brother, his eyes searching for deceit. You lie, he snapped. I pulled the hem of my collar down, exposing my mark, and I watched his eyes widen in awe. Come on. I'll help you, I said and wrapped my arm around him as we began to walk, him still hesitating, but not when I opened the door, revealing Alinda. She gasped in disbelief, her hands shaking as they flew to her mouth in awe, and I could see the tears in her eyes forming. She launched herself at her brother, and I stood to the side, allowing them to reconcile. You're so big, Lena Bug, he told her, smoothing her down in disbelief. Come on, Mom needs to see you, Alinda responded as tears poured from her eyes. Alinda smiled as we helped him downstairs. Once downstairs, I hurried to the kitchen, grabbing a water bottle which Ezra thankfully chugged before I handed him another. I jumped when Elisheba and Jameson ran in, both freezing at the sight of the son they thought they had lost so many years ago. Elisheba didn't wait a second more until she wrapped her small frame around her son. My boy, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I watched as Kiernan came rushing in alongside Danilo, eyes on full alert, still thinking we were being attacked. What's happened? He too was lost for words as Ezra broke from his mother's embrace and revealed himself, limping towards his twin brother. I watched how Kiernan moved slowly in awe, his eyes unbelieving as he looked wary. There's no way. No, Kiernan said quietly. Kiernan, my brother, I am every bit as real as you are, Ezra spoke quietly. I watched in disbelief as Kiernan's face broke, and he catapulted himself into his brother's arms. It was a while until they pulled away, Kiernan smiling at his brother in disbelief as his hand found the side of his face. You've met my mate, Charlene? Kiernan asked, grinning. I smiled as Ezra grinned at me. She carries? Ezra asked, his eyes dropping toward my stomach, and he leaned forward as he inhaled my scent. I nodded, and Ezra grinned, clapping his brother on the back. Congratulations, he said and leaned forward, surprising me with a light hug. I watched as his smile faltered slightly. Brother, we have many things to discuss, he said. Chapter 22. I couldn't help but stare at Kiernan and Ezra as they conversed over lunch, speaking of old times and fond memories. It had been almost 2 weeks of silence. Things were plain and normal, and honestly, it weirded me out to be so relaxed. Most of what Ezra told us we had already known, but he did confirm that most people outside the pack had no knowledge of my pregnancy, though rumors of the female shifter were spreading. Ezra believed Kiernan and his family were dead. His captors had kept him isolated from the world. He would have died if it weren't for one of his captors' daughters, who cared for him in secret. She had started under strict orders to just bring him enough to keep him alive, but their relationship grew as Ezra realized she was gentle. His captors had used a decoy to fake his death, and Ezra eventually fell in love with her. He wished for them to be mates, but feared for her safety. Seeing Kiernan happy made me happy, but the situation was still unsettling. I turned when I heard a feminine voice shouting. Ezra shot up at the sight of a beautiful woman approaching. Her hair was choppy, styled in a pixie cut that looked unintentional, as if she had once held a mane of curls. "Leanne?" Ezra yelled in disbelief. He bounded down the porch as the exhausted woman fell into his arms. I winced at the bruise on her cheek and the dried blood on her mouth. "Oh, love, what did they do to you?" Ezra asked as he scooped her up. "They told me you were dead." I knew it couldn't be true, so I ran, she said, caressing his cheek. "I love you, and there is nothing to be sorry for. I will always stand up for the man I love." Ezra placed her on the ground, and I watched as she turned toward me, her eyes widening. "You're the one they're looking for," she whispered. She pulled a scraggly envelope from her pocket, handing it to me with shaking hands. I opened it to reveal photos of Kiernan and me, taken through our bedroom window. The first was of us laughing, the next of us kissing. I dropped the photos as I read the captions. Under my photo, it read, "Capture alive and unharmed." Under Kiernan's, it read, "Kill on sight, bring me his head." There was a massive bounty on both of us. I could feel the tears staining my cheeks. I wasn't crying out of sadness. I was furious. "Charlene," Kiernan spoke, grabbing my arms to steady me. "I'm not the only one with a price on my head," I whispered. "Listen to me. No one is ever going to take you from me. We are going to be just fine," Kiernan growled. Suddenly, Leanne growled, focused on someone behind me. I turned to see Viviana sauntering by. Leanne bolted toward her and began pounding away at Viviana's face. By the time Ezra peeled Leanne off, Viviana was bloodied. "That bitch was there. She's the one who cut my hair," Leanne yelled. Viviana's face drained of color as she became terrified. "Take her to the cellar. Chain her up," Kiernan commanded. "She's done enough harm. I should have locked her away a long time ago. My apologies to you all. I should have done this sooner." Viviana tried to run, but Danilo grabbed her and Elishaba quickly injected her with a sedative. "Come on, sweetie. It's time," Elishaba told me. I smiled, knowing what she was implying. I relaxed as I lay back in the pack doctor's office. Kiernan sat next to me, bouncing his legs nervously. I closed my eyes as the cold jelly was placed on my belly. A minute passed before Elishaba chuckled. "Oh, darling, she's as healthy as can be," Elishaba said, grinning. "She?" I asked. "Yes, a beautiful girl on the way." I turned toward Kiernan, who was staring at the sonogram in disbelief. He gripped my hand and leaned over my stomach. "Hey, baby girl, this is your daddy. I want you to know you're gonna have a wonderful mama. She's smart and beautiful, and I'm happy because I know you'll be just like her." I jumped as I felt a light kick. "I think she heard you," I said in awe. "Someone's gonna be a daddy's girl," Kiernan said. We walked downstairs to the porch where the pack had gathered. I saw Katrine, Solomona, Piero, and Gisela among the crowd. "So, tell us already," Alinda yelled. Kiernan grinned. "It's a girl." The pack erupted into cheers. I smiled as I rubbed my belly. I was going to be the mother of Kiernan's pup. I finally accepted that this tiny life was half of him and half of me, and I couldn't be prouder. I loved our daughter already. Kiernan cleared his throat, catching me in my thoughts. He took me in his arms, and I stood on my tiptoes to kiss him. "I love you, Kiernan," I whispered. "Today, tomorrow, and forever," he replied. I smiled, knowing one thing for sure. I was not going to let a single person take this away from me. Chapter 23. I sighed in frustration as I threw off the 8th dress I had tried on. We were supposed to go swimming at the lake, but I was struggling to find clothes that fit comfortably. I walked over to Kiernan's drawer, pulled out a black tank top, and slipped it on. It barely reached my thighs, but I was glad it fit at all. I was only about 2 weeks away from meeting my daughter. I tried to calm my breathing as I reached the bottom of the stairs. Even getting ready for the day left me winded. Kiernan sat on the porch with Danilo, Piero, Solomona, Alejo, and Ezra. So much testosterone. I cringed at the thought, and Kiernan looked at me with confusion as the men waved and headed toward the lake. It was over 90 degrees outside, and the heat was oppressive. I perked up when Kiernan handed me a glass of lemonade. I sipped it and sighed. "How are you feeling, darling?" he asked. I shrugged and pulled off his shirt, sitting in my bikini and resting my hands on my rounded belly. Better, I said. Kiernan put his hands up in surrender, but broke into a smile. You look hot, he said, wiggling his eyebrows. I had gained a healthy amount of weight, but Kiernan always made me feel sexy. He leaned in to pepper my face and neck with kisses until I laughingly pulled away. I have to go again. Go put those drinks in the ice chest for me, please, I said. I walked inside and up to our room. After a quick trip to the bathroom, I went to the closet to look for my sun hat. I gasped when a hand suddenly clamped over my throat. I was slammed against the wall, staring into dark eyes. A tall figure held a knife poised against my stomach, his identity hidden behind a hood and a black bandana. He looked down at my stomach, seemingly surprised by my pregnancy. I stood still, unwilling to risk the baby. He tied my wrists behind my back and shoved me toward the window. Please, you do not have to do this, I whispered. Shut your mouth and open the window, he growled. I opened it slowly. Please. I choked back a scream as his hand whipped across my face. My vision blurred from the blow. I knew that as long as I was gone, Kiernan would stay alive. If I wanted him to live, I had to go. I climbed down the ladder slowly, reaching the ground where his accomplices waited. They were far from the lake, no one could hear me. One man gripped my hair, yanking my head back as he taped my mouth and blindfolded me. I was shoved into the back of a van. As we drove, I realized I had to get us both out of here. Desperation for money makes people do terrible things, especially to an unborn pup. After half an hour, I sat up and swung my legs around, getting a feel for the vehicle. I managed to bring my wrists to the front and used my canines to gnaw through the ties. Once free, I removed the blindfold. The van slowed to a halt. I crouched low, ready to lunge. As soon as the door opened and the light hit, I sprang. I collided with a body, striking the man's face until he was unconscious and wrestled a handgun from his holster. Then I bolted into the trees. Shifting was not an option. I had to protect myself. I pushed my body through the woods, ignoring the demand for rest. I could hear muffled voices yelling in the distance as they discovered I was gone. I reached a cliff where a thunderous waterfall poured into the depths below. It was nearly 100 feet down. I knew if I didn't jump, they would find me. I whispered words of encouragement to myself, thinking of Kiernan. Today, tomorrow, and forever, I whispered, and I jumped. Chapter 24. I gasped, greedily taking in air as I broke the surface. I fought to keep my head above the water as the current thrashed me about at a rate that had me stunned. I could already feel myself struggling not to swallow the river. The rapid current was carrying me, and I quickly realized it was useless to fight it. It was fast, much faster than I would be on my own feet, considering I couldn't shift while pregnant. I was thankful I knew how to float, and I held my belly protectively as the water swept me away. This was the fastest way to put distance between the bounty hunters and me, and the quickest way to find my way home. All I wanted was for my daughter to be healthy. I knew that nothing on this earth would keep me from seeing her born alive and well. I let the river carry me, grateful when the remnants of a broken tree came within reach. I grabbed hold of the log and held on tight. I don't know how long I floated there, but I grew cold and tired. I eventually rested my head against the wood and closed my eyes, allowing the water to take me wherever it was going. I sighed with relief as I finally tumbled onto a riverbank where the current slowed. My limbs slowly regained feeling after being in the freezing water for so long. I would rather be cold and alive than captured and my child in danger. The thing that worried me most now was that she was moving a lot. I smiled when I could no longer hear the roar of the water. I trudged away from the bank slowly, my strength depleted from the fight to stay afloat. I was alive. Based on how fast I had been moving, I estimated I was at least 30 or 40 miles away from whoever was trying to kidnap me. I was thankful that the water would wash away my scent and leave the kidnappers on a blind trail. I took my swimsuit off and laid the pieces out on a rock in the sun to dry. After wandering for 10 minutes, I found some wild berries to eat. I eventually found a huge hollowed-out tree trunk beneath a secluded willoma tree and decided it was safe enough to sleep in for the night. I was exhausted. I had only been asleep for a few hours when I felt a sudden wetness. I thought I had had an accident, but when the cramping started shortly after, I knew exactly what it was. I took a deep breath and nodded to myself, trying to remain level-headed. This wasn't how I pictured it, but I would do this. There was no stopping it. My baby girl was coming, and she was coming with a vengeance. I cried out as a contraction coursed through me, my abdomen burning as the muscles contracted. "Oh, baby girl, you sure you can't bake a little longer?" I whispered, rubbing my belly lightly. I bit down on my lip as the pain intensified, trying my best to steady my breathing. "Just have to breathe, Charlie," I told myself. This continued for nearly 3 hours as night fell. I thought it might slow down until I felt the undeniable pressure and the urge to push. I sucked in a breath, growling as I pushed and gripped the inside of the tree for support. I could feel her crowning and winced at the pain, biting the flesh of my palm to silence my scream. I took small pushes for nearly half an hour. I was exhausted, but I knew she was close. When I finally saw the sun peeking into the tree, I realized the night was gone. I must have blacked out for a time. I breathed in one last time, growled, and gave a final push, praying to the moon that my pup would be okay. I gasped in shock as I felt her slip out. I immediately picked her up, my heart sinking when she didn't make a sound. I cradled her in my arms, frantically cleaning her nose and mouth with my swim top to make sure her airway was clear. "Come on, sweet girl," I said, laying her on my chest and rubbing her back. "Please breathe for Mama." "Don't you want to see your daddy?" I cried. I let out a sob of relief when she finally wailed and began to stretch her limbs. I used my teeth to cut the cord and wrapped her in my arms. I was suddenly thankful for my high body temperature as I hugged her protectively against my chest to keep her warm. She was healthy. I sent my praises to the sky as I stared up from the Waloma. She quickly found her way and began to nurse. "Somebody is going to be a strong girl," I whispered. After she finished, I patted her gently as she fell into a sound sleep. "Get some rest, baby girl. We have a lot of work to do tomorrow. But first, I think we should name you." I was thinking, Waloma, it's only fitting since you were born in one. I watched as she made a tiny face that looked just like a smile, little dimples appearing on her cheeks. I chuckled as she responded to my voice. "Well, aren't we going to be a real heartbreaker with those? Little Miss Waloma," I said, kissing her head softly. I needed to give my body time to heal and rest, but after that, we were going home. Chapter 25. I sighed with satisfaction after finishing the last of the berries I had gathered the morning after Waloma's birth. After feeding her, I decided we were strong enough to move. There was still time before nightfall, and I vowed not to sleep in that tree den again. I knew we weren't more than a few hours' walk from home if I cut through the forest. It was warm and bright, the perfect day for our first journey together. I was still tired, but my wolf was already fronting, working double time to heal my body and lend us her strength. We began walking, Waloma sleeping quietly, content and fed. As I moved, I began finding the small caches that stored spare clothing for shifters. I immediately took a pair of joggers and wrapped my pup in them. She woke once to nurse, then cozied right back up and went to sleep. After walking for almost 3 hours, I reached a small wading pool. I cupped some water in my hand, only to realize it was warm. I had been here many times before with Kiernan. I was much closer to home than I had realized. I chuckled and kissed Waloma's head, beginning a light, steady stride through the trees. Anticipation bubbled in my chest. It wasn't long until I broke through the tree line and saw the most beautiful sight imaginable, home. I could see the pack gathered in the distance. I could smell him, too, his intoxicating scent caught on the breeze. I breathed it in greedily. Even from a distance, I could see the darkness under his eyes that spoke of his restlessness and worry, yet he was still the most breathtaking man I'd ever seen. As I neared, the breeze carried my scent forward. A growl erupted from Kiernan as he silenced the crowd, his eyes scanning the area frantically. "I am right here," I said strongly. The crowd turned, and Kiernan pushed through everyone in disbelief. His eyes moved from my stomach to the little bundle I held protectively. He had me in his arms in an instant. I chuckled, using my arms to keep him from accidentally squishing his daughter, knowing his wolf was in control and he would never hurt us. I turned Willoma around so her father could see her. Kiernan gulped, staring down at her as if she were a gift from the heavens. Her name is Willoma, I told him with a smile. He went to speak, but stopped when I placed her in his arms. Her little dark greenish-blue eyes popped open. She knew it was her daddy. Kiernan's face lit up with pure, unadulterated love. Someone is beautiful, just like her mama, Kiernan whispered to her. Willoma grinned, her tiny dimples showing as she looked up at him. Charlene, my mother cried out, tears of relief in her eyes. She embraced me tightly before turning in awe to see Kiernan holding her granddaughter. Oh, honey, she is gorgeous. Come, let us get you all inside, my father said, sending me a warm smile. The first thing I did was shower. The second was eat 4 sandwiches while everyone watched me anxiously, waiting for an explanation. I smiled, seeing Kiernan holding Willoma and feeding her a bottle I had pumped. He eventually passed her to my father, and I saw that she had inherited our eyes. Elishiba and Jameson took their turn next, sitting quietly with their grandchild. I cleared my throat and told them everything. The escape, the jump, and giving birth in the Willoma tree. Kiernan was fuming. His hands shook with an anger that he wore like a second skin. Come on, I said, tugging his hand. What? He whispered, his hazel eyes connecting with my blue ones. Run with me, please, I said quietly. He looked confused, likely because I had just returned from a kidnapping. I do not want to live in fear, Kiernan. We won't go far. Just off the porch. His eyes softened, giving way to my victory. Watch my sweet Willoma, Kiernan told his father, kissing our daughter's head before taking my hand. Outside, Kiernan lifted me into his arms and rested his forehead against mine. I thought I lost you, he whispered. Oh, Kiernan, you are stuck with me for today, tomorrow, and forever, I said, pecking his lips. He growled lowly and kissed me again, taking his time. His spicy sweet aroma surrounded me as I kissed him back. When he pulled away, I smirked and he smiled, knowing the power he had over me. He released me slowly, shedding his shirt to reveal the muscles that flexed with every movement. His chuckle rang out like a baritone bell as he stepped down the porch. I growled and leapt after him, welcoming the shift as I transformed into my wolf. I landed next to Kiernan's brooding figure and pranced around him, letting my tail tickle his chest as I circled him. His chuckle turned into a growl, and suddenly his massive obsidian wolf stood before me. He shook out his fur, licked my face, and bolted into the trees, leading me in a dance of stealth, speed, and love. Chapter 26. I watched as Willoma slept in her napper, nestled in the shade of the porch with 2 male guards standing watch nearby. It had been almost a month of peace and quiet. The question wasn't if they would come back, but when. I was prepared to fight, but for now I cherished these moments and refused to let negative thoughts cloud them. I kissed Kiernan's cheek softly as I sat with my back against his chest, his arms wrapped securely around me. Eventually, I stood up to grab the pasta salad from the fridge, and Alinda followed to get the buns for our burgers. I had just opened the fridge when the doorbell rang, a sound so rare it felt foreign. What the nobody ever uses the thing, Alinda said loudly. I walked to the door slowly. Everyone who knew Kiernan usually just walked around to the back or straight inside, so my suspicion grew with every step. I opened it to find 3 tall men standing on the threshold. Can I help you, gentlemen? I asked strongly. Kiernan invited us over. I am Alpha Kaliba, and these are my cousins, Alpha Bronco and Alpha Tristane, the one nearest me said. He had messy auburn curls and a thick Irish accent. I growled lowly, and Alinda mirrored the sound. Try anything, and I will kill you myself. But please, come in. I am Kiernan's mate, Charlene, I said with a grin, leading them out to the back porch. Kiernan turned with a giggling Willoma in his arms. Because she is the firstborn of an alpha, she was growing rapidly, already nearly the size of a 3-month-old human. Your father? Last I saw you, you weren't anywhere near settling down, Kaliba said with a grin. Kiernan extended a hand to the man, securing Wiloma with the other. "You've met my darling, Charlene?" The little lady threatened to kill me the second I walked in. "I think she's delightful," Kaliba said, chuckling. "She definitely keeps me on my toes." "Don't let her size fool you. She can do some damage," Kiernan said. "It's true. She stabbed him with a fork once," my father added, grinning. Kaliba looked at me in awe, then back to Kiernan. "And you still have all your fingers? Going soft, are we?" "Not a chance. Especially not since my first pup was born." "This is Wiloma," Kiernan said proudly. "Thank God she looks like her mother, sweet girl. Your dad looks like the back end of a—" I growled before he could finish the sentence. "Force of habit," Kaliba said, his brown eyes lighting up as the realization hit him. "So that's why you asked for my help." "Partly. Would you hold her for a second?" Kiernan handed Wiloma to Kaliba, whose eyes widened as he took her carefully, holding her out as if she were made of glass. I chuckled and took her back, propping her on my hip. Wiloma stuck her tongue out and began blowing bubbles, a little heft finally forming on her tiny frame. I kissed her nose, laughing as she went cross-eyed, trying to look at it. Something told me she was going to be free-spirited, just like her Aunt Alinda. "What are you looking at, silly girl?" I asked her. She squealed with laughter, making a high-pitched noise that served as her own secret language. "I'm looking at your big head, Mama," Alinda chirped from behind me with mock innocence. "I can't wait until she learns to walk," I replied with a grin. "Because I'm going to fill her with sugar and send her straight to her Aunt Alinda's house." Alinda's smile dropped instantly, making me and Wiloma erupt into laughter. Ezra and Leon bounded up the porch steps next, followed by my parents and Kiernan's. Ezra walked over slowly, wiggling his fingers as he reached for his niece. I handed her over, watching as he stuck his tongue out and Wiloma mimicked him perfectly. I hugged Leanne. Her gorgeous curls were now shoulder-length and healthy. They had been traveling to neighboring states to form alliances and gather intel on our attackers. "Turn around, Charlene," Leon told me with a knowing smile. I turned, confused, and froze. Kiernan was standing right in front of me with a small black velvet box in his hands. He smiled at my reaction as a few choice words escaped my lips in surprise. "Damn, Charlene, do you kiss our pup with that mouth?" Kiernan asked with a grin before dropping to one knee. I watched in disbelief as the pack began gathering below the porch, all wearing wide grins. Kiernan took my hand. "Charlene, my love. From the moment I saw you, I knew you were the reason for my existence. You captivated me in ways I never imagined. You challenged me, you helped me, and you've loved me in ways I never thought I deserved. It would be the greatest honor to be your husband. You are the one I will give all my love to today, tomorrow, and forever. Will you marry me?" I didn't have to think twice. I nodded, and Kiernan swept me into his arms after sliding the ring onto my finger. I tucked myself into the crook of his neck, staring at the sparkling stone in a daze. Chapter 27. I smiled as Kiernan began kissing my neck. The warmth his lips alone brought had me closing my eyes as I relished the sensation. It had been 3 months since our engagement, and the wedding was only 2 days away. We were finally alone. Everyone had been coming through to see the baby or congratulate us, and while I was thankful, it felt like we were constantly buzzing like bees in a hive, always working, never resting. Wiloma was currently out with all of her grandparents at the local library. Our little girl had taken a real interest in books. When you read to her, her eyes get big, and she listens so closely. I know she understands more than we give her credit for. I moaned softly as Kiernan's lips brought me back to reality. He found the claim on my neck and began slowly teasing me. He pulled away momentarily to lift my shirt over my head. I grinned and flipped us over, straddling his hips as I began kissing his jaw. I let my hands roam over his abdomen and chest as I took his shirt off and tossed it aside. I was just finding the hem of his pants when a deep chuckle and a curse broke the moment. "Don't let us stop you, sweetheart." I was kind of hoping for a show. I looked into Kiernan's frustrated eyes as Jacobus, one of Kaliba's friends, strolled through the back door, followed by Ezra and a few other males. Jacobus was a pig with no boundaries, and I knew Kiernan wanted to choke him as much as I did. I ignored him, leaning forward to kiss Kiernan one last time. Kiernan placed his hands under my thighs and moved them slowly up my back to my waist as he lifted me. He placed me on the ground, and I stood confidently in my bra and jeans, picking my tee up and pulling it over my head. "I am going to go shower," I said, smiling. I showered quickly and returned to the living room, only to see a dark-haired woman with her arms snaked around Kiernan's neck in an overzealous embrace. Kiernan was struggling to yank her off. He had a moral code against harming women who weren't threats, but I certainly didn't. I growled, letting my wolf show through my eyes as I bared my canines. "Excuse me. Who the fuck are you?" "Get the hell off my man," I said. The room went silent. Kiernan finally managed to rid himself of her and stepped back, looking relieved. The woman turned, trying to find the face to match the voice. "So you're Charlene. You were not as pretty as I thought you would be in order to get Kiernan." "I have been trying for years," she hissed. "And by the looks of it, you still are." "Why?" I asked, grinning as I edged toward her. "Just wanted to have a little fun." "Have you seen him? He looks like a Greek god." "Imagine the taste, imagine the size of his." "Oh, honey, allow me to clarify," I interrupted. "I am his mate. I don't have to imagine anything. I know exactly what it is like. Now, you can fantasize all you want, but at the end of the day, he is mine. Touch him again, and I will rip the hair from that delusional head of yours." Kiernan stifled a laugh. Anger boiled in the girl's eyes. I had embarrassed her. She made the mistake of lunging at me, but Kiernan intercepted her, gripping her arm and shoving her back. Hard enough for her to know not to try it again. "You lay a hand on her, you automatically become my enemy." "I will kill you myself," Kiernan growled. She backed away in fear before sprinting out of the house. Leanne and Alinda ran in next, their eyes telling me they were ready for the pre-wedding festivities. They were planning the wedding, and to say they were thrilled was an understatement. Katrine and Solomona arrived shortly after, and the girls began preparing for the bachelorette night. We were having a movie and pizza night inside, while the guys were going to camp out in the yard. I knew there was going to be some drinking involved, and with Alinda and Leanne already stirring the pot with the men, I had a feeling an all-out war of pranks and late-night antics was brewing. No one would be sleeping tonight. Chapter 28. I grinned as Alinda walked in, so many pizza boxes piled in her arms that you could barely see her dark hair. Katrine followed, completely hidden behind her own stack, and we laughed as they set the boxes down on the counter. Leanne was already at the blender, grinning from ear to ear as she whipped up margaritas. I found myself slightly concerned when a bottle of unlabeled brownish liquid appeared. The unmistakable scent of high-proof booze hit my senses as Katrine opened it, chuckling maniacally while she poured it into shot glasses. I knew whatever this was, it was definitely not meant for human consumption. I couldn't help but grin, excitement blooming in me as I looked at the girls who all held their glasses high. 1, 2, 3. Katrine yelled. I threw the shot back. The liquid refused to go down smoothly, its potency making us all cringe and cough as it burned a trail to my stomach. "Oh, that tastes like gasoline," Leanne wheezed, immediately chugging her soda. I nodded, chasing the burn with a lemon-lime soda and sighing in relief as the cool liquid soothed my throat. "We should go give the boys their pizzas before they get cold," I suggested. Alinda grabbed the boxes, and we headed toward the door. I bounded down the steps as Kiernan emerged from behind his newly pitched tent. His dark shirt matched his features, and I couldn't help but admire my mate as he walked toward me, illuminated by the crackling fire nearby. "Are you checking me out, darling?" Kiernan asked, stopping a few feet away. "You're kinda hot. You come here often?" I asked with a grin. "Yeah, I live with this smokin' hot babe. She's got the prettiest eyes, beautiful cinnamon-colored hair, and she's smart as a whip," he said, pulling me closer. "Oh, she sounds like a catch." I winked. Kiernan growled playfully, and in the next second, I was in his arms as he peppered my face and neck with kisses. "Oh, nope. I don't think so. No boys." Alinda yelled, gripping my arm and pulling me back up the steps. I chuckled as Kiernan growled at his sister, who promptly flipped him the bird to an echo of laughter from the men. "It's pizza and margarita time, ladies," Alinda announced as soon as the door shut. I hopped up on the counter and began to eat, sipping my drink and finding the potent mix much more bearable the second time around. I could already feel a warm, carefree buzz settling in. "We have to play Never Have I Ever," Leanne exclaimed. We had just agreed when a loud clap of thunder shook the house. We screamed at the sudden noise, and a moment later, the men came sprinting inside, grins on their faces. They knew the sudden downpour gave them the perfect excuse to crash our party. Kiernan looked especially comfortable in his Batman sweats. "Yep, that's my man." "We were just about to play Never Have I Ever," I told them. Kiernan's eyebrows shot up. He lifted me off the couch only to sit down and pull me onto his lap. Ezra, Danilo, and Solomona did the same with their mates. Kiernan reached for my drink and took a large gulp before he realized what it was, cursing immediately. "Damn, if I didn't know any better, I'd say you were trying to take advantage of me," he grinned. "You know it would take about 10 of these to even get you buzzed." I laughed, and he kissed me quickly. "All right, bride-to-be," Leanne said. "You go first." "Never have I ever been blackout drunk," I said. Alinda flipped me off as she, Leanne, and surprisingly Kiernan drank. "Not proud of it, but I thought my twin brother was dead," Kiernan said, holding his hands up in mock surrender. "My turn," Leanne said. "Never have I ever kissed someone of the same sex." I smirked as I was the only one who took a sip. "Holy shit." Alinda laughed in disbelief. "It was years ago. It was a dare, I needed the money, and it was just a kiss," I said, cutting off Kiernan before he could start a round of questioning. 3 margaritas and 5 rounds later, the room felt light. None of us was drunk by human standards, but the buzz was definitely there. Ezra eventually lifted a snoring Leanne to take her to bed, and Danilo and Alinda were getting a little too cozy on the couch for my comfort. I stood up, gripping Kiernan's hand and leading him toward the stairs. I stopped a few steps up, enjoying the rare moment where we were at equal height, and kissed him deeply. Kiernan grinned as I pulled away, my fingers suggestively catching the drawstring of his sweatpants. "Does the future Mrs. Lupin want something from her husband?" he asked lowly. "Stop teasing and take me upstairs already," I said, the alcohol fueling my bravery. Kiernan growled, and a second later, we were in our room. I lay back on the bed, watching as he undressed, my eyes traveling over his muscular frame unashamedly. When his eyes locked with mine, the humor was gone, replaced by a raw, predatory desire. He moved toward me, each calculated step filling me with a yearning for his touch. He loomed over me, caging me between his arms, our skin meeting from the chest down. I gasped as his mouth descended, beginning an agonizingly slow journey across my skin to the spot where I wanted him most. I closed my eyes, letting the world fade until there was only him. Chapter 29. I woke to the sound of soft cooing and babbling beside me. My heart filled with joy as I saw Willoma lying in her father's arms. Kiernan was holding her up in the air as she giggled down at him. He was already dressed, looking completely dazed by his daughter's smile. "Oh, hi, my Lolo girl," I chirped. Her startling blue eyes shifted toward me instantly, shining with glee. I sat up, pulling the sheets with me as I took her into my arms. "Mama missed you." "Did you have fun with your grandparents?" I made a dramatic face, sending her into a fit of chuckles. After feeding her and letting her nap, I handed her back to Kiernan so I could shower. I dressed in a simple tee and shorts and propped her on my hip as we walked downstairs. Kiernan made faces at her the whole way down, keeping her laughing. In the kitchen, the delicious aroma of Elizabeth's scrambled eggs, toast, and hash browns filled the air. Gisella's eyes lit up when she saw us, her movements a blur of vampire speed as she pulled me into an embrace. She immediately reached for Willoma, who seemed enthralled by Gisella's mysterious aura. The peaceful morning was shattered when Alinda's unmistakably loud voice ripped through the territory, screaming for help. Gisela didn't hesitate. She clutched Willoma to her chest and ran up the stairs to safety, with Elisheba trailing behind to guard them. I was off the porch in a heartbeat, spotting a frantic Danilo. The air was thick with a sickly, familiar scent, sulfur. Fireworks began whistling and exploding in various directions, clouding my senses and making my ears ring. "I can't smell her, Charlene," Danilo yelled, his eyes wide with terror. "What if they've hurt her?" "Danny, calm down. We have to split up," I said, bracing my hands on his face to force him to focus. He nodded, shifted into his wolf, and dashed toward the trees. Kiernan gave me a curt nod before running off, and I took the opposite direction with Jameson close behind. 10 minutes into the dense forest, the scent of jasmine and pineapple, Alinda's scent, hit me. But it was mixed with something else. Something I had smelled before. I followed a low growl and froze. 2 massive rust-colored wolves stood in a clearing. One of them held Alinda by her thigh, her body dangling like a rag doll. Her heartbeat was thundering, but she was bleeding out fast. "Let her go," I growled, my canines extending. The wolf tossed her aside, and her body hit the ground 20 yards away with a sickening thud. As I moved toward her, both wolves snarled. The message was clear. I would have to fight for her. I sprinted forward, shifting into my wolf mid-leap. I slammed into the wolf on the left, my teeth sinking into his throat. I yelped as the second wolf clamped his jaws onto my hind leg. I spun, shifting back to human form to slide my leg out of his grip, and kicked him hard in the snout. He shook his head and began to prowl toward me. An idea formed in my head. "Come on," I taunted. As the wolf lunged, I flattened myself against the dirt. As his torso passed over me, I jabbed my hand upward. I felt the bones in my hand crack as I tore through fur and flesh, reaching deep into the beast's chest. With a roar of effort, I yanked out his heart. His lifeless body collapsed on top of me. I scrambled out from under him, staring at the warm, beating organ in my hand. I dropped it in disgust, my hand shaking with pain. My wolf relished the kill, but my human side was reeling. I heard Alinda's strangled voice and ran to her, ignoring the blooming pain in my calf. "I've got you, Lena. It's going to be okay," I whispered, lifting her into my arms. I carried her toward the house, screaming for help until Piero found us. He took her from my arms and blurred toward the house. I collapsed on the porch just as Kiernan, Jameson, and Danilo arrived. "Kiernan," I gasped as he examined my leg. Inside the house, I could hear Alinda screaming she was in pain, but she was alive. The scent. It wasn't just the ones I killed. It was familiar. My father began setting the broken bones in my hand and bandaging my leg as I looked up at Kiernan. "Who, Charlene?" Kiernan asked, his thumbs smoothing over my cheeks. "It was the scent from the banquet," I said, the realization finally hardening. "That redhead woman and her brother, the one whose face I clawed. It was them." Chapter 30. We need to do something. My father growled, his pacing wearing a literal groove into the floorboards. "Not yet," Kiernan said, his voice deceptively calm. "Are you fucking crazy? They almost killed both your siblings and my daughter on more than one occasion. You must be out of your mind to believe that." "Dad, stop yelling at him. Yelling is not going to solve anything." I snapped, my patience wearing thin. He growled at me, the heat of his anger radiating through the room. I was shocked when, in the next second, he was pinned against the wall. Kiernan had him by the throat, a solid, immovable grip that silenced the room instantly. Kiernan had finally snapped. "You think I overlooked the fact that my mate's life is in danger?" Kiernan growled, his voice a low, terrifying rumble. "That there are people willing to hurt my family and my daughter to get to her? I know that. But I will never leave her. Unlike you, I will never cower from a threat." It lights a fire under me. And tomorrow, when I take that vow for all to see, every wolf living and breathing will see that my love for that woman is unyielding. You are an idiot if you believe I would ever put my family's life in jeopardy by walking into this blind. Kiernan slammed him against the wall once more before releasing him. His eyes were smoldering, and I knew if my father wasn't my father, he would have been a dead man. Without another word, Kiernan ripped his shirt off and stalked outside, his powerful stride vibrating with fury. The door slammed, and a moment later, I heard the sound of him shifting into his obsidian wolf. I sighed, staring at my father as he tried to gather the shreds of his dignity. Dad, I'm fine. Leave me alone, he hissed. Just because you're mad doesn't mean you take it out on me, I growled. I stood up, ignoring the lingering ache in my leg, and headed upstairs. I found Wiloma with Gisela, who had been patiently reading picture books for the past hour. I thanked her as she headed back downstairs, and I spent the next 2 hours rocking my daughter. By the time I placed her in her crib, the healing power of my wolf had finally restored my hand. Flexing my fingers felt amazing. I moved to the window, glancing at the silver bars lined with wolfsbane, a grim but necessary precaution. Below, on the porch, Kiernan's voice boomed as he addressed a crowd of men. Ezra, Danilo, Piero, and Jameson stood firmly at his side. Leaving the guards at Wiloma's door with strict instructions to take her to a grandmother if she woke, I headed down the stairs. I nearly bumped into Leanne and a newly awakened Alinda, who was still navigating on crutches. Alinda's eyes were bright, looking more full of life than they had since the attack. She leaned in and whispered, "I'm pregnant." I couldn't help but let out a muffled scream of joy. The thought of Wiloma having a cousin so close in age made my heart swell. "I haven't told Danny yet," she said, her face glowing. "He's going to be so excited." We stood by the glass sliding door, watching the men. "What are they talking about?" I asked. "I don't know," Leanne and Alinda said together. "Well, let's find out," I said, sliding the door open with a grin. Kiernan's body stiffened the second he heard the door. He turned, his alpha mask firmly in place. "Charlene, go inside." His tone was demanding, but I could see the tiny crinkles at the corners of his eyes. He was trying to play the part of the stern alpha, but he couldn't stay mad at me if he tried. I cocked a brow, looking behind me with mock confusion. "Unless there's someone else named Charlene here, I know you aren't talking to me like that," I said, letting out a playful growl. Kiernan smothered a grin with a cough that he tried to turn into a growl. I growled back, my eyes flashing with my wolf's light as I stepped into his space until our chests touched. The men behind him cursed in hushed awe. "Charlene, my darling," Kiernan said, his voice softening as he leaned in. "I'm sure you'd love to join us, but you have wedding preparations to address." I smirked as he nuzzled my neck, inhaling my scent before placing a chaste kiss at the base of my throat. "You're probably right. I have some pampering to do with the girls. I may or may not steal your credit card," I said, pecking his lips. "What's mine is yours, darling," he said with a laugh. "I'll bring home some dinner. Feel like anything in particular?" "I would love to gorge myself on my beautiful mate," he whispered, leaning closer, "but our guest bedrooms may be a bit full tonight." I slapped his chest, laughing as I looked past him at our audience of guest wolves who were straining to hear our conversation. I grinned and waved at them. "Any ideas for dinner, boys?" I asked aloud. Chapter 31. Shopping went fairly quickly because Alinda and Leanne had everything pre-ordered. Alinda wouldn't let me see a thing as she, Leanne, and Katrine bolted into the house with bags full of secrets. Alinda was almost entirely healed now, and she had finally shared the news of her pregnancy with Danilo. To say he was excited was an understatement. He had her perched on his lap as we all ate, one hand splayed protectively across her stomach. I smiled down at Kiernan, perched on his knee since our extra guests had taken up every other seat in the house. "How are the wedding plans?" I asked aloud. Kiernan leaned back with a grin, his eyes alight with humor. I knew I wasn't going to get a word out of him. I gave him an innocent smile and twisted in his lap so we were face to face, wrapping my arms loosely around his neck. "Nice try, Charlie, babe," Kiernan whispered, staring at my lips. He leaned in, but I pulled back just enough to make him grip my waist tighter. His eyebrows went up, and he smirked at my playful refusal. I stared into his hazel eyes, watching them burn with amusement and a hint of lust. Finally, I gave in, kissing him softly. I still couldn't believe how I felt when I was with him. "I love you, Kiernan," I said, resting my head against his chest. He pressed his lips to my forehead in a tender kiss. The moment was interrupted by Wiloma's familiar screech of joy as her guards brought her downstairs. She gleamed the second she caught sight of Kiernan. "Who's the prettiest pup in all the land?" With eyes of baby blue, I sang the song we'd made up weeks ago. Wiloma giggled and clapped her tiny hands. You know, we should have another one, Kiernan said with a grin, pulling me closer. I'm the one who becomes the size of a house, remember? I teased. And until things settle down. Especially with that redhead girl and whatever she's planning, I think we should wait. Kiernan nodded, though I could see a flash of the same longing I felt. I wanted a house full of his babies. As soon as this is over, we can try again, I whispered, shooting him a wink. But for now, we can still have fun. You know they aren't going to let us sleep in the same bed tonight, Kiernan said, referring to his sister's pre-wedding rituals. Oh, I know. But who said anything about a bed? I laughed. I stood up, handing Wiloma to Grandpa Jameson, who took her happily. I need to go use the ladies' room, I announced, sending a private wink to Kiernan before making my way upstairs. As soon as I was out of sight, I darted to the bathroom and locked the door. I threw the second-story window open to see Kiernan already below with a mischievous grin. Hurry up, I whispered. He chuckled, took a running start, scaled the side of the house, and gripped the ledge. I propped my leg against the wall for leverage and grabbed his hand, helping his massive frame through the not-so-Kiernan-friendly window. We went flying backward onto the bathroom floor, and I whined as my head clipped the bathtub. Kiernan lifted me up and placed me on the counter in front of the mirror, brushing my hair aside to check for a bump. Would you just kiss me already? I growled, tugging him toward me by his shirt. The second his lips found mine, his spicy aroma flooded my senses. I wrapped my legs around his waist, holding him flush against me. I growled and ripped his shirt right down the middle, needing to feel his muscles beneath my fingers. Kiernan broke free for a second, growling with approval at my bluntness before bringing his lips down to my neck in a hot, fervent assault. It wasn't long until the high of being with him took over, the world outside that bathroom door completely forgotten. Afterward, I opened my eyes to see him smiling at me. I love you, but you need to go before they think I fell in the toilet, I whispered. Out the window. I insisted before he could tease me. I watched him jump with a laugh and run back around toward the front of the house. I washed my hands, straightened my clothes, and walked downstairs, only to find every eye in the room on me. Alinda came forward, smirking. Why did it take you so long to pee? I drank a lot of liquids? I offered. Is that why my brother just ran in out of breath and missing his shirt? She countered. Oh no, honey, I said with a grin. I was sitting on the toilet so long I fell in. Kiernan jumped into the second-story window to help me out and used his shirt to dry me off. Duh. The room erupted into a fit of laughter at our less-than-subtle rendezvous. Chapter 32. I sighed as I sat up in bed, letting my legs hang over the edge as thoughts swam in my head. I tried my best not to drown in them. I checked the clock. It was a few hours past midnight. I needed to clear my head. My thoughts were eating away at me like a plague. I stood up quietly and walked over to the closet, throwing on a pair of shorts, but not bothering with shoes. I wanted to feel the cool earth beneath my feet, something solid and true. I slipped off the porch steps, sighing as I felt the grass. It was still dark out, the sun would come soon, but for now, the night reigned over the territory. I stared at the still tree line, watching a cool breeze sweep through, causing the branches to sway. I turned as I heard the door click. I gave Kiernan a small smile as he stepped off the porch. I couldn't sleep anymore, I said. And I can't sleep without you, so here we are, darling, Kiernan said quietly. I chuckled to myself. Typical possessive Kiernan. I loved him for it. You want to go for a swim? He asked. I smiled, thankful for the much-needed spontaneity. Last one there has to jump? I challenged with a grin. Without a second thought, Kiernan bolted. He shifted into his wolf, nearly matching the black of the night, when he was already yards ahead of me. I shifted and followed, catching up enough to nip at his tail. I growled in frustration when he reached our spot first. He shifted back to human form, chuckling as he waited for me. I leapt onto the rocks a few feet above the water and let my body revert. I stood there for a moment as Kiernan grinned up at me and whistled. I did a little dance before taking a running start and leaping off the ledge. The water was hot, enveloping me in a warm hug that instantly heated my skin. I surfaced, wiping the water from my face, to find Kiernan inches from me. His smile was small but sure. "You're so beautiful," he stated. I went to speak, but he put a finger to my lips, suddenly on alert. I stood quietly when a noise ripped through the air, followed by a stench and a bubble floating to the surface. My jaw dropped in disbelief as Kiernan's laugh bounced off the rocks and echoed around us, just as the sun began to peek over the horizon. "You did not just fart," I yelled, splashing him. He smiled, staring at me as the playfulness faded into something more serious. "What is going to happen, Kiernan?" I whispered. "Well, in about 10 hours, we're going to get married," he answered. "You know that's not what I meant." "We invited nearly everyone to the wedding," Kiernan said. "If whoever is trying to hurt us decides to show up, they'll likely want to create a spectacle. If that happens, I will not hesitate. Wedding or not, if there is a threat to my family, I will end it then and there." "And if they don't show?" I asked. "Well, that's awfully rude." "The only reason you wouldn't want to go to a wedding is if you have something against that person. It's a dead giveaway of your intentions." "I take it personally," Kiernan said suggestively. "I want Willoma guarded at all times. I can protect myself, but she's innocent. I don't even want to imagine, if something happened to her," I growled as tears stung my eyes. "I could never forgive myself if she were hurt because of me." "Charlene," Kiernan said sternly, tilting my chin up. "We are going to be okay." I took a deep breath, splashing my face to compose myself. "You're right. I'm a female shifter. If anyone should be worried, it should be them." Kiernan's smile stretched from ear to ear. "Damn right," he said with a wink. I lay back, allowing myself to float and watch the sun fight the darkness. I watched as the morning triumphed over the night. Victory. I would have it too. And not a single person would get in my way. I must have gotten a little too relaxed because when I blinked my eyes open, we were back inside and Kiernan's sleeping face was in my sights. I leaned forward, kissing his head softly and smiling at Willoma. She was snoring as she clung to Kiernan's shirt, sleeping peacefully against his chest. She was getting so big, her hair was starting to sprout in beautiful brown curls. My life was beautiful. I couldn't believe that something that started off so unwillingly would become something I'd be willing to die for, something I never wanted to live without. I smoothed Willoma's hair and watched as her eyes popped open at the feel of my skin on hers. She smiled at the sight of me before snuggling deeper into her father's chest. I closed my eyes, letting sleep take hold of me one last time before the big day. Chapter 33. I cursed as Alinda brushed through my long hair. I'd been sitting at this rarely used vanity for 2 hours, and my butt was starting to tingle. "Oh, calm down. You'll thank me later when you look stunning," Alinda retorted, focusing on a stubborn curl. "So, has he told you where he's taking you on the honeymoon?" Katrine asked. She was beaming as she and Leon lay out their deep purple satin dresses. I hadn't even thought about that. "Wow, we've been so busy I completely forgot about the honeymoon part." Alinda let out a light chuckle. "Oh, you two are definitely going somewhere, but it's a surprise. And don't worry, Willoma is going too." I breathed a sigh of relief. I wasn't about to leave without my precious girl. Not even a hint? "Nope. I've packed your things, and you guys leave right after the reception on Kiernan's private jet," she said with a grin. I blinked. I knew Kiernan had resources, but a private jet? "Where do you even get a private jet from?" "He knows a lot of people," Alinda said, shrugging with a smirk that looked exactly like her brother's. "You Lupins are something else," Katrine laughed. "And soon enough, I'll be one," I said, the weight of the day finally settling in. And I couldn't be more excited. Kiernan's voice boomed from the other side of the door. "Don't you dare come in here. It's bad luck," Leon yelled. Kiernan chuckled darkly. I knew he could rip that door off its hinges as easily as I could pick a petal from a flower, but he respected the boundary. "I have a certain rambunctious baby girl named Willoma who wants her mother. It'll just take a minute," I said, tightening my silk robe. I opened the door to find my parents holding their granddaughter, looking sharp in their wedding attire. Kiernan's retreating chuckle floated down the hallway. "He told me to tell you, and I quote, Your reproductive system isn't ready to get hit with this amount of temptation, so you don't get to see me yet, my mother said. My father cringed at the phrasing. That definitely sounds like him, I said, laughing as I took Wiloma. She was wearing a tiny pale lavender tutu dress and looked like a literal angel. Duh, she yelled, pointing down the hall. I rolled my eyes. Kiernan hadn't shut up about her saying dada, but she had yet to say mama. We'll see your crazy daddy in a little bit, fancy girl, I told her, kissing her nose. As the girls finished getting ready, I felt the nervous bubbles of excitement in my belly. Weddings were a more human tradition, but I loved Kiernan more than anything, and I wanted the world, human and wolf alike, to know that he was mine. Let's get this show on the road, I said, handing Wiloma to Leanne. The bridesmaids cleared out, leaving me with my father. He handed me my bouquet. I breathed in the floral scent, trying to steady my heart. I never thought I would have a chance to walk a daughter down the aisle, he said quietly. I am so proud to call myself your father. I know I am undeserving of a daughter like you, but I am so thankful you are in my life. I wrapped my arms around him. I love you too, Dad, I whispered. We tucked our arms together as the signal came to exit. Why am I so nervous? I whispered as we stepped onto the path of white petals leading into the forest clearing. Because it's your wedding. Even the toughest loonists get stage fright, he joked. As we broke into the clearing, I was in awe. Hundreds of people sat on wooden benches lined with tulle. Every head turned, and every eye was on me. I slowed my pace as the string instruments began to play, and my eyes searched for the only person who mattered. I clutched my father's arm as my knees threatened to give out. Kiernan stood at the altar in a black suit that fit his muscular frame perfectly. His jet black hair was tousled just right, his beard neat. He looked like a god. Then he smiled, and my entire world lit up. His hazel eyes found mine from across the yard, unabashedly roaming down my frame before locking back onto my face with such raw emotion that my cheeks burned. We reached the front, where Jameson stood as the official. My father kissed my cheek and placed my hand in Kiernan's. As my hand met his, the warmth of his touch grounded me instantly. Kiernan gripped my hand firmly, the swirl of love and intensity in his eyes taking my breath away. We turned toward Jameson, and as our guests took their seats, the ceremony began. Chapter 34. I hadn't heard a single word Jameson was saying. I was too busy staring at Kiernan as he smiled down at me, his thumbs rubbing soothing circles across my knuckles. I was only brought back to reality when Jameson announced it was time for our vows. Alinda stepped forward with Wiloma, who immediately reached for her father. Duh, she yelled, beaming as he took her. I reached around her neck, grinning as our baby girl babbled to her father while the crowd chuckled. She held our rings on a small necklace, and I undid the clasp slowly. She leaned in and licked my face as I drew back. Ma, she squealed. I gasped, and Kiernan praised her as we both beamed. She had finally called me Mama, and I felt my heart completely melt. I love you too, my baby girl, I whispered, kissing her head before taking her into my arms. Kiernan nodded in playful defeat, knowing I'd won the first word, war. I placed Kiernan's ring in his hand. He twirled the small band between his fingers as the clearing grew quiet with anticipation. Charlene Marie Saxon, I love you with my whole heart, he whispered, his voice steady and deep. From the day I saw you, I knew you would be my life. In you, I found my purpose. In your heart, I found my love, and in your soul, I found my mate. I am yours, and you are mine. I will cherish, protect, and love you today, tomorrow, and forever. He slid the ring onto my finger. I felt the tears spilling over, my vision blurring as I stared up at him. Kiernan Lupin, I began, my voice trembling slightly. When I first saw you, I was afraid not of you, but of what you could do. You were so different, yet you opened your heart to me. I knew you could make me fall in love with you, and it terrified me. Now, I love you more than anything. You teach me every day what love is and remind me that I deserve it. You are mine, and I am yours, for today, tomorrow, and forever. I slid the ring onto his finger, feeling a sense of absolute completion. Jameson took Wiloma with a smile as he prepared for the final blessing. Now, will everyone please stand as I give you Mr. and Mrs. Loopy? Jameson was cut off as Kiernan's lips found mine in a slow, passionate kiss. I wrapped my arms around his neck, his scent of mint and firewood enveloping me. I could feel Kiernan relenting his control as his hands dropped to my waist, pulling me flush against him. Cheers erupted around us. Kiernan rested his forehead against mine, his eyes shining. I love you so much, Mrs. Lupin. We walked down the aisle together, fingers laced. Amidst the sea of smiling faces, my eyes caught a flash of flame-red hair. It was the man from the banquet, the one I had scarred. He was alone, and oddly enough, he seemed genuine in his applause. I wouldn't let him ruin this moment. It was his sister I truly had a score to settle with. Wiloma screeched with joy as we reached the reception area. The smell of the pizza bar, catered by Pierrot, was mouthwatering. Everything felt perfect. My parents, my new family, my friends, I had never been so happy. Wiloma reached for Gisela, who took her and began to twirl gracefully across the dance floor. Pierrot approached us, offering his congratulations. Charlene, you are a beautiful bride. Alinda led the rest of our family toward us, dragging a laughing Danilo behind her. She threw herself at me, knocking us both to the grass. Who gave her sugar? I yelled as she sat on top of me, grinning. Suddenly, she leaned down and kissed me right on the mouth before pulling away nervously. I burst into laughter, reaching up to take her hand. Listen, Alinda, I know I'm a hot mama and your hormones are raging, but I'm married to your brother now. You can't just kiss me in front of him. Kiernan growled playfully and hoisted me over his shoulder, giving me an excellent view of his firm. My thoughts were shattered by a screech. It wasn't a cry of excitement, it was fear. Wiloma may be a pup, but she is a future alpha. She could read a person's true intent, and her cry was a warning. I was at her side in seconds. Gisela was in a protective crouch, clutching Wiloma, as a red-haired woman stood before them. I knew that sent anywhere. The night I found Ezra, the kidnapping. It was her. I didn't want to shift. I wanted to look her in the eye as I broke her. She wouldn't even get to look at my child again, and I was going to make sure she regretted ever stepping onto our land. Chapter 35. I wasn't quite sure how long I had been punching her until hands were finally peeling me away. The scent of blood surrounded me, thick and metallic, but it only fueled my wolf. I had been hitting her with a force that made the onlookers gasp, but I didn't care. I should have done this ages ago. Kiernan held me tight, likely realizing that a crowd was forming as guests moved toward the dining area. He didn't want any more witnesses to my shifting nature than necessary. I was still growling, staring down at her unconscious form, my wolf scratching at the surface and demanding to finish the job. Alinda, please entertain our guests, Kiernan ordered, his voice echoing with alpha authority. Leanne and Ezra, if she's alive, take her to the holding cells beneath the storehouses. Before anyone could protest, I was in Kiernan's grip and back in our room. I was still battling my wolf internally, my breathing ragged and heavy. I could hear Kiernan shouting my name, trying to pull me back from the red haze, but I couldn't focus. It wasn't until he pinned my arms above my head and growled directly into my face, his own eyes flashing with the dark gold of his wolf, that the spell broke. My wolf's attention snapped to her mate, to the alpha standing before us. She relished his dominance, his alpha side was on full display, and every part of me was drinking it in. Kiernan's eyes dropped to my chest, exposed by our tangled position, and he smirked. He leaned forward, pressing a lingering kiss to the top of my breast before pulling away slowly, leaving me breathless and wanting more. Tease, I hissed. Oh, Mrs. Lupin, trust me, he promised with a wink, you'll get more than enough of what you want later. My fingers were still itching with residual adrenaline, and I stepped into the bathroom to catch my breath. The cool breeze floating through the open window helped lower my temperature and steady my heart. I washed the blood from my skin, ridding myself of the stench of the girl I'd just broken, and changed into a white lace sundress. When I walked back out, Kiernan was starfish spread across the bed. Is she dead? I asked quietly. No, Though I'm sure she wishes she were, he said firmly, staring at the ceiling. Charlene, this is our day. Do not let anyone take that from us. I nodded. He was right. This was a celebration of our family and our future. I launched myself at the bed, landing in the Charlene-sized crook of his neck and kissing his jaw. I'll keep my cool if you keep yours, I whispered. I grinned as Kiernan held out his hand, pinky extended. I hooked my smaller finger with his, sealing the promise. Now let's go show these people how to party, Kiernan said with a smirk. He carried me back to the reception on his back. Most of the guests were still eating shyly, but my family was already making the most of it. I spotted Danilo trying to clean pizza sauce off a wiggling, laughing Waloma, who was happily gnawing on a crust while Alinda danced beside her high chair. I headed for the pizza bar, settling on one of every topping and a hefty serving of fettuccine. I made my way to the table where Kiernan sat with Ezra and Leanne, who were currently debating who was the better dancer. Kiernan spun me onto his lap, but he crossed a line when he reached over and bit into my pizza. I gasped at the audacity of the man as he swallowed my pepperoni. You're my wife, he said with a cheeky grin. What's yours is mine. You're lucky there are witnesses, I warned, gesturing to the crowd. So are you, he growled in my ear, his lips brushing my skin. If it weren't for the audience, I would take you right on this table. Some of these people could learn to live a little. I yelped and accidentally slid right out of his lap and onto the floor. I was too stunned by his bluntness to stay upright. Are you all right? My mother asked, the setting sun casting a warm glow around her. I nodded, staring up at Kiernan from the grass. He didn't even bother to stifle his laugh. I couldn't help but smile. I loved him so much it hurt. Dance with me? I asked, reaching up my hand. Kiernan's face softened. I'll never tell you no, he said, lifting me to my feet with ease. He snapped his fingers, and a beautiful, slow melody began to play. I wrapped my arms around his neck, letting the music surround us. Kiernan kissed me softly as we began to move. Thank you, he said suddenly, his hazel eyes swirling with emotion, for making me understand that I am worth it. If someone as lovely as you can love someone like me, I know I'm headed in the right direction. You are my everything, Kiernan, I said honestly, resting my head against his chest. You are a good man, and I love you with my whole heart. He lifted me into his arms and spun me around. I gripped his tie, pulling him down to my level to kiss him, a slow, deep kiss that promised forever. You are, and always will be, worth it, I whispered against his lips. Chapter 36. I chuckled as I danced with Alinda, while Leanne and Katrine moved to a heady beat that burst through the clearing, the music bouncing off the ancient trees. Alinda kept trying to feed me shots, which I gracefully threw over my shoulder. I was fairly certain I had hit a few people by now, but I was more confused by how Alinda was acting tipsy when she hadn't had a single drop of alcohol. I cringed when she handed me yet another one a few minutes later. I quickly tossed it behind me, only to hear a sharp expletive from the person standing directly in my wake. I tensed, recognizing the short-cropped red hair immediately. Kiernan was in front of me in a heartbeat. His large frame shielded me as he stepped into the man's space until their heads touched. I peered around my husband's shoulder, watching in awe as the man bared his neck in submission, acknowledging Kiernan's dominance without a fight. I mean no harm to you or your family. I am Bronco, the man said, his voice steady despite the tension. What do you want, Bronco? Kiernan growled. I only wanted to dance with Luna Charlene so I could speak with her, Bronco said, his eyes shifting to mine with a look of worry. And about what, exactly? I asked, shoving past Kiernan's extended arm. My sister Clarabelle and my father's intentions to kill your mate and child, he said bluntly. Kiernan's hand shot out, gripping Bronco by the shirt and hoisting him off the ground until they were nose to nose. I wish to help you, Bronco yelled, fear finally flashing in his eyes. I'm tired of their lies. I know they're wrong. What they're doing is not right. After tonight, you tell my father everything, Kiernan growled, releasing him. But if I even suspect for a moment that my mate or my pup is in danger because of you, I will rip your heart out. Bronco stood up straight and nodded in understanding. I softened, offering the man a small smile. "Bronco, don't worry about your sister for right now. Have some fun." Kiernan's cold facade broke, and he reached out to shake Bronco's hand. The redhead looked shocked at the gesture, but shook it slowly, a small smile forming on his face. I grinned when I spotted Viviana in the distance. Her blonde hair was pulled into a high ponytail, and her eyes were fixed on Bronco. He was undeniably handsome. His green eyes and red hair were a striking combination. Viviana looked absolutely starstruck. I walked toward the table where she sat alone. I was honestly surprised she was here. After being locked in the cellar, we had learned the truth. She had been desperate for security and money to buy a house, which is why she'd taken the job to cut Leanne's hair. Leanne, in a move that shocked the pack, had forgiven her. Leanne understood the desperation that comes with having nothing. I understood it too. My history with Samuelson and my mother brought back memories I didn't care to relive. Viviana had been on strict probation, working around the territory as penance. It was her choice to stay and fix her life, or leave and face the world alone again. She looked stunned as I sat next to her. Before I could speak, the words tumbled out of her mouth. "Luna Charlene, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I know I'm not an easy person to be around. Life wasn't easy on me. I'm not using that as an excuse, but I lost myself. Time in the cells helped me realize I'm tired of hurting. You showed me mercy where I deserved none, and I respect that," she said, bowing her head and baring her neck. I smiled. Seeing growth in someone you thought was heartless is a beautiful thing. "Viviana, I forgive you." She looked up, her eyes watering. I saw a different woman in front of me, one who was no longer a crone-spirited rival, but a pack member finding her way. "Why don't you ask him to dance?" I whispered, nodding toward Bronco. "Was it that obvious?" she asked, suddenly nervous. "I've always been the one approached. I don't know if I can do this." "You can, and you will," I encouraged. She stared at me for a moment before bursting into a fit of laughter. We both ended up snorting and covering our mouths in embarrassment. "You guys are a beautiful family," she said softly, watching Kiernan dance slowly with Willoma in his arms. "We are, aren't we?" "And you really are a good Luna," she added. I gripped Viviana's hand and led her toward Bronco. When we were only a few feet away, I gave her a playful shove, hard enough that she collided right into Bronco's shoulder. He caught her before she hit the ground, and I smirked as he smiled down at her and the two began to talk. I walked back to my family, who were watching the scene in total disbelief. "You were just talking to Viviana," Alinda stated flatly. I was. Without clawing her eyes out? "Yes, ma'am," I said with a grin. "Has hell frozen over?" Alinda mumbled. "Possibly," I responded, my heart feeling lighter than ever. Chapter 37. After dancing, eating, and drinking for what felt like forever, the night finally began to wind down around midnight. Our last out-of-town guests departed, leaving only our pack members, who were still buzzing with post-wedding excitement. I smiled, holding a sleeping Willoma as I watched Kiernan and Ezra. They were currently trying to outdo each other in a pizza-eating contest, seeing who could put away the most slices. Alinda came forward after hanging up her phone, a massive grin on her face. "That was the pilot. The jet is ready." I was so exhausted that I'd almost forgotten we were leaving for our honeymoon. After a round of heartfelt goodbyes, I found myself in the back of a car with Kiernan. He held Willoma as she slept, and I must have followed her lead into dreamland because the next thing I knew, we were landing. I gripped Kiernan's arm as he chuckled at my confusion. As we prepared to disembark, I caught the scent of humans. A flight attendant walked toward us, her white button-down tucked neatly into a pencil skirt. I could tell she was human by the way she looked at Kiernan, complete infatuation. Humans are naturally drawn to our kind. We have an allure they can't quite place, but can't seem to resist. "Anything else I can help you with, Mr. Lupin?" she asked, her voice a bit too cheery to be real. "You can help my wife with her bags," Kiernan said firmly, placing my bag in her hand. Her face contorted into a brief flash of disdain, shooting me a jealous glance. I just adjusted Willoma against my chest and stepped past her. As we exited the plane, I gasped. I had emerged into a world of vibrant greenery and deep ocean blues. It was the complete opposite of our home in the mountains. Instead of dense pines, I saw lush tropical trees and water so clear it looked like crystal. Oh my gosh. Kiernan, I squealed. Yes, he asked with a grin. We're in Bora Bora. I recognized the iconic bungalows lining the water's edge. Alinda and I had seen this place in a travel magazine months ago, and it had been at the top of my dream list. He chuckled, taking Wiloma from my arms and strapping her into a carrier on his chest so she could look around. My feet hit the warm sand, and I looked in amazement at the turquoise waves. We made our way up a ramp toward our private bungalow, which hovered right over the water. Inside, a middle-aged couple was finishing a spread of breakfast foods. They clearly knew Kiernan, greeted him warmly, and cooed over Wiloma. I was stunned when Kiernan began speaking to them in fluent French. Between his Spanish, Italian, and now French, my husband was full of surprises. He thanked them graciously, and they waved goodbye. I turned to him, wiggling my eyebrows as I picked up a chocolate-covered strawberry. So, Mr. Lupin, you speak French? How sexy. Kiernan laughed as he settled Wiloma into her high chair, giving her some fruit to gnaw on since her teeth were coming in. We sat down together, enjoying the quiet morning. Suddenly, something hit me in the face. I looked up to see Kiernan with a bowl of whipped cream and a smirk. I wiped my face, licking my fingers. You're lucky our child is watching, I teased. Oh? Please elaborate, he said lowly, his hazel eyes blazing. I grinned, the tropical heat starting to get to me. I think we should go for a swim. I'll change Wiloma if you... You'll change Wiloma because I have to change myself and you love me, I said, standing up with a smirk. Your mother is feisty, isn't she, Wiloma? Kiernan asked our daughter, who just mumbled in confusion. I changed Wiloma into her little suit and then found one for myself. As I stepped out, a familiar heat rose in my abdomen, a rising temperature, and an itch that only my mate could calm. I stepped outside to our private deck. Kiernan was blowing up an inflatable duck for Wiloma to sit in. I cautiously handed him our daughter and waded into the water, diving below the surface to hide my reaction. When I surfaced, a shirtless Kiernan was standing right over me. Before I could say a word, his nose buried itself in my neck, greedily inhaling my newly enticing scent. Chapter 38. Kiernan circled me quietly, like a shark in the water stalking its prey. Your heat has started once again, Mrs. Lupin, he whispered in my ear. His voice alone sent shivers of want down my spine, leaving me yearning for the cool touch of his skin against my feverish flesh. I shivered as his fingers brushed my arm. He took a sleeping Wiloma from my arms. She lay her head on his shoulder, exhausted from her breakfast and the travel. Kiernan, you know what will happen if we do this, I said, gesturing to the bunk where Wiloma was now drifting off. I was amazed at how easily she settled for him. Usually, it took a song and a rocking chair for me to get her down. Kiernan simply nodded with a small, knowing smile. I definitely wanted more pups, but was now the right time? Bronco's sister, Clarabelle, was in custody, Bronco was on our side, and Viviana was finally coming to her senses. Things were good. We were happy. Our children would be close in age, bonding just as I had always dreamed they would. My face must have betrayed my thoughts, because Kiernan flashed a devilish grin that made my heart flutter. He turned on his heel and retreated into the bungalow without another word. I took a deep, shaky breath, my head spinning at the anticipation of his touch. With a man like Kiernan in my life, I was surprised I stayed sane at all. I walked into the bungalow, only to be immediately pinned against the wall. I chuckled darkly, spinning us around and pressing Kiernan back against the wood by his shoulders. I pressed my lips to his firmly, taking control of the rhythm as we moved toward the bed. Kiernan fell back onto the mattress, and I straddled his hips as we landed. I freed myself from my top, kissing him deeply as my hand trailed down his chest, over his taut abdominal muscles, and found the laces of his swim trunks. I pulled them down, and the heat in Kiernan's gaze spiked my need for him. I rid myself of the rest of my swimsuit, letting us get as close as possible. I felt him fill me, and our moans matched in perfect time. Kiernan's hands found my hips, trying to set the pace, but I growled warningly. I pressed my palm against his chest, pinning him back against the headboard and the pillows. I closed my eyes, rocking my hips in a slow, steady rhythm that brought wave after wave of pleasure. The pressure built until I quickened my pace. Kiernan's guttural sounds of completion only encouraged me, and I felt my own release align with his. I stayed there for a moment, breathing heavily, before moving to lie beside him. The way he watched me, with hooded eyes still dark with lust, was enough to spark another wave of desire. I lay back against the pillows, watching as he got off the bed and walked around the edge. He lowered himself to his knees, his weight sinking into the mattress as he hovered over my legs. I closed my eyes as he placed a kiss on my foot, another on my ankle, and then on my calf. He slowly worked his way up my legs until he reached my thighs. He parted them gently, kissing the sensitive skin inside, causing me to arch into his touch and fist my hands in his hair. I yearned for him to move higher, but he suddenly rose, a devilish smirk on his face as he stared me down. "Kiernan," I warned, my voice tight. "What do you want, Mrs. Lupin?" he asked innocently. "Kiernan, now is not the time for games," I said, a wave of heat hitting me so hard I had to grip the sheets. "I only asked you a question. Answer it, and you'll get more than enough of what you crave," he growled. I growled in frustration. He was playing his game of dominance, showing off his alpha side, and my wolf was absolutely relishing the display of power. "I want you, Kiernan." Inside of me. "Now," I said firmly. He chuckled lowly. The heat of his breath so close to me made me gasp. His fingers skimmed up my leg teasingly before he crawled over me, positioning himself between my legs. "Now, don't scream too loud, Charlene," Kiernan whispered, his eyes dark and hungry. "Our daughter is sleeping." Chapter 39. I was finally feeling better after a week, so Kiernan extended our vacation. We had spent most of the first week in the bungalow, lost in each other, but on our final day, Kiernan decided we should hike as a family. I was excited to see the wildlife. Wiloma was absolutely enthralled by the butterflies that fluttered across the island. The only downside was that my heat wasn't just enticing to Kiernan. Human males, and even some women, were drawn to me. Despite the rings on my finger, they would flirt, oblivious to the predator standing right next to me. I found it amusing to hear their hearts racing and smell their anxiety, but as soon as Kiernan introduced himself as my husband, their interest turned to immediate jealousy and fear. I was currently in the middle of a bath with Wiloma, who had decided her breakfast of scrambled eggs belonged in her hair. She sat in my lap, playing with a rubber shark, while I looked down at my already growing belly. It was slightly bigger than it had been with Wiloma, and I knew we were going to have a big pup this time. Kiernan and I had decided to keep the pregnancy our little secret until we got home. The peace was shattered when Kiernan rushed into the bathroom, his eyes frantic. He motioned for me to get out of the tub immediately. I stood up, hugging a wet Wiloma to me as I hurried to the bed to dress her. "What's wrong?" I yelled as Kiernan shouted into his phone before slamming it shut. "Your father is injured. Bronco was found dead, and Clarabelle escaped," he rasped, shoving clothes into our suitcases without even folding them. "What do you mean she got out? And what happened to my dad?" I screamed. "I don't even know." Kiernan growled, his fist plowing into the wall in frustration. The phone rang again, and I snatched it up. "Elishaba? What's happening?" "It's your father." I don't think. "You should get here as soon as you can, honey." "You need to say goodbye," she answered, her voice breaking. I froze, the phone slipping from my hand. Kiernan watched me in confusion, picking it up as his mother's voice continued to call my name. I felt a wave of nausea so strong it sent me keeled over the toilet. Kiernan scooped me up, and the world became a blur of tropical colors as we moved with alpha speed toward the airstrip. The next time I blinked, we were on the plane. Kiernan was saying my name, trying to reel me back from the void. "He's dying," I whispered. Kiernan looked at me with deep sympathy. I held up a hand to silence him. I couldn't bear to hear platitudes. "He's going to die because of me." All of this is because of me, I said, staring at the empty seat in front of me. I should have killed Clarabelle when I had the chance. If I hadn't gone into heat, we would have been home. If I hadn't stayed when you tried to leave me, none of this would be happening. Charlene, this is not your fault, Kiernan growled. And you know what else? If you hadn't stayed, Ezra wouldn't be here. Alinda would be depressed. Your parents wouldn't have found their way back to each other. Willoma wouldn't be here, and we wouldn't have another on the way. Call me selfish, but I wouldn't trade our life for anything. I sighed and nodded, the tears finally flowing. He was right, but the weight was still crushing. The plane's satellite phone rang. Kiernan stood and answered it, his shoulders slumping as he listened. He didn't have to say a word. I knew my father was gone. I clamped a hand over my mouth as a sob broke free. Kiernan pulled me into his arms, reclining the seat so I could lie against his chest as I mourned the man I had only just begun to truly know. Chapter 40. I wiped my face, not caring what I looked like as I walked into the house, my slightly protruding belly hidden by the hoodie I wore. I entered the living room quietly, where my mother lay on the ground, still holding my father's hand as she wept into the crook of his neck. Everyone turned as I entered. I stood at the edge of the room, staring down at my father's lifeless body beneath a blood-stained sheet. I didn't understand how this happened. What happened? I asked Elishaba quietly. Bronco is dead, so his title should have gone to his firstborn, but since he doesn't have a pup, it went to the next sibling, she started. Clarabelle is Alpha. She can shift, I said, putting it together. Your father went to take her water and food, and she shifted for the first time. She was uncontrolled, wild. Clarabelle, she wanted to kill your father on purpose. He wasn't an alpha anymore. He couldn't fend off her attack, and by the time we got to him, he was too far gone. I'm sorry, Charlene, Elishaba said, wiping her tears. But I am an alpha. I can fight her, I growled. She also took something of his, Jameson warned, walking toward the sheet. I don't know if you're ready to see this. It's gruesome. I gave him a curt nod. Jameson peeled back the sheet slowly. My voice caught in my throat at the sight of my father's clawed-out eyes. Those blue eyes, so similar to mine, were gone. I'll kill her, I said. You're pregnant, Charlene. You aren't going to do anything, Kiernan said firmly. I watched as everyone's eyes landed on my midsection in disbelief. Surprise, I said in a monotone, unzipping my sweater. Elishaba was in front of me in a second, her hand smoothing over my stomach. How far are you? About 2 weeks, I think, I answered. You need an ultrasound now. You're a little bigger than normal. Your body could be under stress, Elishaba said quickly. I sat on the couch as Leon rushed to get the portable ultrasound machine. Elishaba squeezed the cold gel onto my skin, and I jumped at the temperature contrast. I closed my eyes as she began the examination. My eyes popped open in confusion when the monitor picked up an offbeat rhythm. What's wrong? I asked. Nothing's wrong, doll. I've heard that sound once myself. When I had the boys, she said with a small smile. Twins, I said, and she nodded. They grow a lot quicker than one pup. Your caloric intake is going to have to triple to provide enough energy for you and the boys. Boys? 2 boys? You can see already. From what I can tell, yes, she said with a weak smile. I looked up at Kiernan, who dropped to his knees beside the couch, smoothing his hand over my stomach. My boys, he whispered. When will I have them? I asked. Their growth rate accelerates with twins. Anywhere between 3 to 5 more weeks, I'd assume, but I'm guessing shorter since your father was an alpha, she said quietly. A few weeks went by. The funeral came and went, and my boys grew every day. I visited my father's resting place daily with my mother, who missed him dearly but had stopped crying. She was stronger now, and I had to be too. I'd been on bed rest as I drew near my due date. I hated it. It was impossible to find a comfortable position. I sighed as I lay in bed next to Kiernan, who slept against my very round stomach, with Willoma between us. She was starting to walk now, wobbling everywhere and talking to everyone in her not-so-coherent words. I sat up and walked downstairs quietly to get a glass of water. There hadn't been any signs of Clarabelle since she escaped, though Kiernan had scouts searching for her. I reached for a glass, and suddenly the window shattered. I dropped to the ground on instinct, wincing as something sharp grazed my ear. I looked up to see an arrow sticking into the wall. I touched my ear. My fingers came away bloody. A small black bag hung from the arrowhead with my name on a white tag. Kiernan ran in, holding Willoma protectively. He shouted, and Willoma's guards appeared, taking her to the panic room under the fireplace. Kiernan stayed out of sight of the window, motioning for the rest of the family to stay back. I crouched low, struggling with the size of my belly to move across the floor. It was a message. For me. I stood up and moved past the broken window. No other arrows came. Charlene, Kiernan growled. If they wanted to kill us right now, they could have, I said. I had been standing right there. I walked to the wall and plucked the bag from the arrow, grabbing the letter. Clarabelle's stench wafted from the paper as I opened it. I want Kiernan. I am watching you, and I am coming for you and your family. I challenge you for your position as Luna of the Lupin Pack and as mate to Alpha Kiernan Lupin. Challenging a mate was a traditional ritual, rare and fought to the death. Official law stated that she had the right to challenge, and there was no submission. It would cement someone's end. The council would have to be present. Clarabelle didn't care who she hurt, including her own brother, Bronco, who had been found dead in the woods. I dropped the letter, my anger bubbling over as I peered into the black sack. I dropped it in disbelief as a pair of piercing blue eyes, preserved and terrifyingly similar to my own, stared back at me from the depths of the bag. I wiped my tears, standing upright with a new resolve. The only way she could take my position was to kill me. The only way she could take my mate was if I and my pups died by her hand. I was not going to let that happen. Elishaba, I need you to induce me, I said, my voice cold. As soon as my sons are out of me, I'm going after her. I won't play her game. That bitch is going to play mine. Chapter 41. I gave birth to Jameson and Eric Lupin 13 hours after reading that letter. I named them after both their grandfathers, strong, respectable men. Both boys inherited Kiernan's dark locks. Jameson took his hazel eyes, while Eric was born with the same stark blue eyes as his sister, me, and the grandfather whose name he now carried. I wasted no time. 2 weeks after the twins were born, I was up and training as hard as ever. It was the only way to keep my focus. I took a deep breath and threw a final punch at the heavy bag hanging from the tree outside. The bag flew off its chain, landing in the dirt several feet away. I wanted to hurt Clarabelle so badly that the fury fueled every strike. The council was due to arrive at any moment to organize the challenge. I walked inside, gloves still on, and stopped when I saw Kiernan. His eyes were blazing as he stared toward the kitchen. Jameson, Elishaba, and my mother were there, each holding a grandson, but the room was heavy with the presence of the men sitting at the end of the table. The council. To my shock, Alejo stood among them. He had replaced the man who had once tried to take my first pup. I hoped the odds were finally shifting in my favor. I imagine you already know why we are here, Alexander said, wasting no time. Clarabelle Brosnick, Alpha of the Stone Ridge Pack, has challenged you for your title as Luna and mate to Alpha Kiernan Lupin. The challenge is a fight to the death. There is no submission. In order to be named victor, you must kill your opponent. Do you accept or refuse? Say, I do refuse. What then? I asked curiously. You automatically forfeit your title and are deemed rogue. You will be forced out of the pack and your mating is seen as void. Your opponent automatically receives your title and the right to mate Kiernan Lupin. Any offspring from the previous mating will be seen as bastards under traditional law and are sentenced to death by the hand of the victor, or they must leave as well. I growled, my wolf snapping at the injustice of laws so ancient they felt like a cage. I, Charlene Lupin, Luna, and mate to Alpha Kiernan Lupin, accept the challenge. No one would touch my pups as long as I drew breath. My first act as victor would be revisiting these outdated laws, but first, I had to survive. Alejo began explaining the routines. My blood ran cold when he mentioned that Clarabelle would be allowed a meeting with Kiernan alone and unsupervised. Are you kidding me? He's my husband. Does that mean nothing? I growled. I trusted Kiernan, but Clarabelle was a viper. Do not worry, Charlene, Alejo said. They are not allowed to touch. It is a formal occasion. Since you are the challenged party, you pick the destination for the meeting and the fight. Pierrot's restaurant tonight. And the fight will be in the clearing tomorrow night, I said immediately. Alexander nodded. Kiernan must come with us now. He is not allowed to touch either challenger until the meeting is over. It is the law. There was no use fighting it. Kiernan started to protest, but I placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. I'll see you tonight, I whispered. I turned to Alexander. Can I at least say goodbye to my husband? He nodded, and a second later, I was in Kiernan's arms. I breathed in his scent of mint and firewood, memorizing it. You'll win, he whispered. I know. Good. Because there's no life worth living if you're not in it. I kissed him fiercely. When Alexander cleared his throat, I released Kiernan's hands, locking eyes with him one last time. I let out a breath and Kiernan gave me a tiny, imperceptible wink. He had caught my cue. Kiernan said his goodbyes to his siblings, parents, and children before exiting with the council. Alexander lingered for a moment. I am very sorry about your father, he said quietly. Eric was a changed man. I'm glad he found his peace. I nodded as a tear escaped. He did what was right in the end. Thank you, Alexander. He walked out, leaving the house quiet. I breathed in deeply. I was ready. Soon, this would all be over. Chapter 42. I was so annoyed that I didn't even want to get dressed or put on makeup, but Leanne and Katrine finally wore me down. Alinda, my mother, and Ezra were staying home to watch the kids, just in case Clarabelle tried to pull a stunt while we were away. But that ignorant woman didn't realize that Kiernan's life was tied to mine. If I die, he does. I doubted she actually wanted Kiernan at all. He was just a bonus in her power play. I stepped out of the car with confidence, flanked by Leanne, Danilo, and Jameson. We headed into Pierrot's, which had been closed to the public specifically for this formal occasion. I walked with a predator's stride as Pierrot joined my left side, giving me a curt nod of reassurance. I chuckled as we entered the dining room. The council was already seated, and you couldn't miss Clarabelle if you tried. Her natural odor was drowning in a perfume so strong it made me want to gag. She was leaning toward Kiernan, who sat in a striking black suit, looking completely unamused. I had chosen a black satin midi dress that hugged my curves and featured a slit running all the way up my thigh. I ignored the council's greetings. Grabbing a spare chair, I dragged it across the floor and slammed it down at the end of the table where Clarabelle and Kiernan sat. She growled at the sight of me. I just smirked. So, what are we talking about? I love a good dose of gossip, I said, planting my elbows on the table and leaning as close to Clarabelle as possible. She was wearing a skin-tight pink dress with a plunging neckline, pathetically waving herself around in Kiernan's face. I turned my attention to Kiernan. His eyes were glued to my outfit. Clarabelle wasn't the only woman who knew how to show a little skin, and nursing had done wonders for my cleavage. Hello, Alpha Lupin, I said with a flirtatious smile. Mrs. Lupin, Kiernan growled back. That reminds me, I'm quite hungry, I said, picking up a menu. What I want to eat is not on the menu, Kiernan added, leaning back in his chair and playing along, his eyes traveling up my frame. In a flash, Clarabelle lost it. She lunged across the table, gripping Kiernan by the shirt and forcing her lips onto his. Kiernan, knowing the rules prohibited touching, didn't hesitate. He grabbed her by the neck and shoved her back roughly. She hit the floor on her backside. When she tried to come at him again, I growled. You broke the rules, I said firmly. It took everything in me not to launch myself across the table and wring her neck. My hands shook with the effort. Kiernan chuckled and took my hand in his. Clarabelle made a move toward me, but Kiernan instantly shifted his weight to position himself as a shield. Clarabelle's father rose from the table, but Jameson and Alexander quickly intercepted him. I locked eyes with her father. I know you're behind this. You're too much of a coward to do your own dirty work, so you whisper in her ear. You helped kill your own son, and now you're willing to kill innocent babies? They don't deserve to lose their mother. I saw the growl vibrate in his chest. I'd hit a nerve. You should also know. Kiernan's life is tied to mine. You kill me, he dies, and this all will have been for nothing. But this isn't about him, is it? You want to be the only female shifter. That's why you're doing this. You know my daughter will outdo both of you by her first shift. This challenge is the only way you think you can stop our line, but go ahead and try, you dumb bitch. I was born for this. You had to kill to get your title. I sat in a booth adjacent to the table. Clarabelle stared at me, her eyes filled with a toxic mix of anger and jealousy. She knew if she attacked now, she wouldn't make it out alive. She growled, shifted into an auburn wolf, and bolted out of the restaurant with her father jogging after her. Kiernan stared at me, and I shot him a look. You could have pushed her off sooner. He slid into the booth next to me. If I recall, you're the one who told me to bait her. Besides, you have nothing to be jealous about. He leaned in and kissed my shoulder. I sighed and rested my head against his. I know. Besides, I look good. I slipped out from the booth and stood up. Where are you going? He asked. I'm hungry. If you think I'd come to Pierrot's and not get garlic bread, there's something wrong with you. Bread and I have a special relationship. It pleases me in ways you never could, I said, wiggling my eyebrows. Is that a challenge? Maybe, Alpha Lupin. Why don't you come find out? I picked up a fresh roll from the basket, moaning as I took a huge bite. Kiernan just shook his head, leaned in, and kissed me squarely on my stuffed, puckered lips before sitting back down. Chapter 43. I sighed as I lay tucked into Kiernan's sleeping frame. I traced the taut lines of his abdomen with my fingers, liking the feel of his warmth beneath my fingertips as I traced his muscles slowly. I kissed his cheek softly, admiring how his long lashes fanned over his skin. I let my eyes wander over his sharp features, from his close-shaven beard to the thick masculine brows that framed his face perfectly. I sat up just to look at him. I smiled when his eyes opened, and he looked right back at me. What are you doing, love? He asked quietly, his voice husky from sleep. You're beautiful, I said honestly. He reached toward me, bringing me down to lie against his chest. It takes beauty to see beauty. I couldn't help but laugh. Too cheesy? I questioned. He nodded as I stood up to grab my robe. I had just slipped it on when a harsh knock on the door broke the peace. Despite my being dressed and Kiernan bare, he stood up boldly and opened the door fully. My smile vanished as Alexander stood there, looking stunned. Kiernan didn't move, but I shoved past him as Alexander did his best to stare at the ceiling, much to my amusement. I just came to see how you were doing, but you're occupied. I'll be downstairs, Alexander said as Kiernan chuckled and slid on his boxers. I turned to a grinning Kiernan. Put some clothes on. I laughed, trying to push his huge frame into the closet. I'm going to take the kids downstairs. I opened the door to the adjoining room to see Wiloma jumping up and down in her crib. She sat down quickly when she saw me. I saw you, Lolo, I said, pointing at her as she laughed. I picked up the twins while Wiloma bobbed behind me, and we hobbled down to where Kiernan had homemade waffles started. Dada, Wiloma yelled. Kiernan scooped her up, peppering her face with kisses. Alinda and Danilo walked in shortly after, Alinda holding her days-old daughter, Lillian. She was blonde like Danilo, but had the Lupin hazel eyes. We had a quiet brunch, and I spent the afternoon cuddling with Kiernan and the kids. It wasn't until night began to fall that the nervousness in the air returned. Alexander walked in with my mother. Clarabelle is on her way. When you are ready, we will be in the clearing, Alexander said. I didn't fail to notice how he stopped and kissed my mother's cheek, or the small smile that lit up her face. It was time for her to heal, and I hoped she was doing it for herself. I waited until Alexander was gone, then pulled Alinda up the stairs. Alinda, I don't know how this is going to go, I said, grabbing a duffel bag from behind my vanity. No matter what, we can't trust Clarabelle. If things look bad, I want you to take the kids as fast as you can and get on the jet. I've called the friends in Bora Bora. There's a house ready for you. Promise me. If I die, I can't let my kids die too. Alinda wiped her tears and nodded, taking the bag. I hugged her one last time before walking downstairs. Kiernan took my hand as we walked toward the clearing, our family following in a heavy silence. I didn't have to see Clarabelle to know she was there. One of us wouldn't walk away from this. Kiernan kissed my head before releasing me, and I made my way toward Alexander. Charlene. Because Clarabelle broke the pre-challenge rule, you get to choose the fighting form. Alexander spoke. Both human and wolf, I said immediately. I stepped into the center as it began to rain. I didn't even hear the air horn. I just saw Clarabelle sprouting into her auburn wolf and lunging. I grounded my feet and shifted at the last second. The sound of our bodies colliding matched the clap of thunder overhead. We catapulted back, rolling in the grass. Clarabelle's jaws snapped at my face, her claws grazing my neck. I cringed at the pain in my throat and the smell of blood, but I managed to shove her back with my hind legs. I jumped up, shifting human and running at her full speed. I let my claws extend, tearing into her thigh and bottom half. She reached up, dragging me down by my hair. Her fist connected with my cheek, and I countered with a blow to her lip. She morphed back into her beast and bit down on my arm. I cried out as she thrashed her head, my wrists snapping in several places. I used my good hand, gouging her eye as hard as I could. She howled and released me. As she shifted human, screaming and clutching her bloody face, an eye for an eye, as I'd promised, I shifted back into my wolf. I jumped upon her disoriented frame and began ripping at her. The scent of blood and the bitter metallic taste filled my senses. I didn't stop until her screaming was silenced. My vision was clouded as I shifted back to human. I looked down at my mutilated fingers and bent wrist, everything covered in crimson. Kiernan, I croaked, clutching my throat with my good hand and staring up at the dark, thundering clouds as the rain began to wash the red away. Chapter 44. The first thing I noticed when I woke was that my wrist still ached slightly, but it was wrapped tightly and healing much quicker than I had anticipated. I was back in our room. I coughed, my throat stinging, and ran my fingers over the smooth material of a thin bandage on my neck. I tugged it off, relieved to find the skin beneath was smooth and unscarred. My healing was holding up its end of the bargain. Despite my stiffness, I stood up and made my way toward the door. It swung open before I could touch the handle, revealing Jameson with fresh bandages in hand. He muttered under his breath and immediately scooped me into his arms. "Does everyone around here forget I have 2 working legs?" I asked as he carried me down the stairs. "I'd rather not hear my son gripe about how you could hurt yourself," he countered. "Besides, you have a pretty bad gash on your leg that took a while to stop bleeding. You need to keep the pressure off it. And I was planning to hug you anyway. I hadn't even felt the leg wound during the challenge. Are the pups okay? Where is everyone?" "Kiernan?" I asked as we reached the living room. Jameson set me down by the sliding glass door leading to the porch. "Glad to see you're okay, sweetheart," he said, giving me a light, reassuring hug. I opened the door slowly, and my heart lurched with happiness at the first sight I saw, Wiloma. She was hobbling around with a slice of watermelon, looking much more stable on her feet than when I'd last seen her. Jameson had mentioned it had been a few weeks, but seeing her growth in person made the passage of time feel real. She squealed at the sight of me, dropping her watermelon and reaching up. I picked her up without hesitation, breathing in her scent, a mix of vanilla, mint, and watermelon. I spotted the twins in their rockers next to Lillian, all sleeping soundly. Ezra, Leanne, Alinda, and Danilo bounded up the steps just as Kiernan came into view. He was carrying a large ice chest, looking handsome in a deep blue long-sleeve shirt. He set the chest down, and the moment our eyes met, his face transformed with a smile. I didn't want to wait another second. I needed to feel his warmth and know that our forever was finally safe. I practically threw myself into his arms, burying my face in his chest. He held me close, his hands smoothing circles on my back as he breathed me in. "It's over. We're all okay," he whispered. He pulled away just enough to wipe the tears from my cheeks with his thumbs. I was so scared, I admitted. He nodded quietly and kissed my forehead. "I knew you could do it. I just hated that you had to. I will never stop fighting for what I love," I promised. "And to think. You once stabbed me with a fork," he said, the corner of his mouth twitching. I chuckled, fisting his shirt to bring his lips to mine for a brief, fierce kiss. Don't test me, Alpha. I still have plenty of silverware at my disposal. He planted a final kiss on my lips before lifting me and scooping up Willoma, carrying us both to the picnic table. I sat between my mother and Alinda, who greeted me with tearful hugs, across from Jameson, Elishaba, and Alexander. I watched Kiernan walk over to Ezra, clapping him on the back by the grill. Then, a familiar face appeared. Katrine, I cried, hugging her. She and Solomona were visiting from their pack, and her son was already nearly a year old. It was amazing how fast life was moving. I looked around at my family and friends, the people who had risked everything for me. I finally had a home, and I loved every one of them with my entire heart. Charlene, why are you crying? Alinda asked. Because I love you guys. And I know you love me too, I said, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. Kiernan's eyes met mine from across the porch. The coldness that used to live there was gone, replaced entirely by gentleness and tenderness. He tipped his head to the side, a silent invitation. Hand in hand, we walked away from the porch and toward our familiar spring. We climbed the boulders until we were 20 feet above the water. Kiernan removed his shirt and pants, and I did the same, tossing mine next to his. I looked down at the water, thinking about how my life used to be like that, still surface, quiet, and empty, until Kiernan arrived and created waves of life. Do you have any idea how much I love you? I asked. An inkling, perhaps, he said with a smirk, taking my hand. Well, I do. And I always will. Today, tomorrow, and forever. We jumped, hand in hand, plunging into our future together. Epilogue. I sighed as I watched Willoma run with Solomona towards the porch, her stride smooth and calculated as she easily outran her friend. She was almost 18 and would soon take over the pack. She trained hard, and I couldn't imagine anyone more suited or more enthusiastic for the job. I laughed when Lillian appeared behind them, out of breath and clearly frustrated as her big hazel eyes squinted. Learn to keep up. Willoma yelled, her light brown hair sashaying behind her as she slowed to a jog up the porch. I watched as she greeted Piero and Gisela with a smile, then turned toward Kiernan, who sat with his sons as they ate. I walked outside, sitting next to Kiernan and Gisela, smiling when he kissed my cheek. I watched Willoma. She was beautiful, honest, and strong. Everything I'd always hoped she would be. Are you okay, Mom? She asked as she sat between her brothers. Yes. I'm just proud of you all, I said. Willoma smiled at me, her dimples showing before she went to the ice chest. We did well, didn't we? Kiernan whispered to me. We certainly did, I said. I watched Willoma stand, her gaze fixed on the tree line as she took a step off the porch. Did you guys see that? She asked as she turned, her big blue-green eyes wide with curiosity. I turned my attention to the direction she pointed, seeing nothing except the slight twitch of a branch in the distance. Oh, sis, you're so paranoid, Eric said after taking a drink from his soda. I'm serious. I swore I saw someone, she said, waving her hand as if it were obvious. We would have smelled him when we were on our run, Solomona said. She tilted her head in deep thought as she stared at the tree line before turning around. I swear I saw someone. He had the strangest red eyes, she said as she came back up the steps. Willoma's choice. Being the daughter of two of the strongest wolves in history, Willoma's life has always been in the spotlight. Now that Willoma has reached the age of maturity, it is time for her to succeed her parents and be alpha to her pack. Willoma is shocked when a change in their once traditional law forces her to make a drastic decision after being given an ultimatum, take a mate or forfeit her title. Facing the possibility of losing all she's worked for, Willoma makes a decision for the good of her pack. The man she chooses to mate is a shock to everyone, including herself.